walking Parliament Square as I do every morning around that. Coming down, stopped the traffic lights just before they go on the superhighway. I turned left with fellow cyclists. As I come round the corner, I could see on the right-hand side where the traffic lights are on the opposite side of the road that there was a cyclist, unfortunately, had been injured and hit, and there was a number of other cyclists standing around. There's a couple sitting down as well. There was a couple of pedestrians attending to that injured person. As I carried on, just obviously you slow down, see what's happening. As I carried on down, I was told to get off my bike by a police officer. It looked like a police officer themselves, and they said to me to get off the bike and to move back and to back up the road. Clearly, and they mentioned that there was an incident. As I got off my bike, I could clearly see in the distance there was a car in the barrier with smoke. It seemed to me like it had just happened. As I then dismantled my bike and walked across the road, suddenly I found to myself it was a clear serious incident, and my first instinct with a young son and a wife at home was to get away from the scene. I could see that the injured cyclist on the road appeared to be a lady in a recovery position, was being seen to by a paramedic who had turned up. So I walked across the road up to Westminster Abbey. There wasn't any injuries. There was obviously a lot of confusion. I could hear a lot of sirens and obviously response vehicles coming towards the scene. I then continued to walk up that road. I rang my wife to let her know that I was okay, anticipating there'd be some news coverage of this stuff. And as I walked up, I then told them I did, and that was what I did. I continued on my way to work.
Yeah. And when you say other cyclists told you that the car had come across the road, can you tell if the car that ended up at the barrier would have had to drive on the wrong side of the road where you saw the injured cyclist on the floor?
Well, coming from where I was coming from, I mean, clearly the cyclist was on that side, was on the opposite side of the road, where if you're cycling that way, you would go around Parliament Square, around the one-way system. And there's only two ways that have happened. Is the cyclist was hit at force and forced across the road at force and has gone on to the other side of the road, or they've been hit on that side of the road. So from where I saw it, it does look like that could have clearly happened. And whether, I mean, as I said, when I walked up Westminster towards Westminster Abbey, there was no other injured people. So there's two ways you can drive, on the wrong side of the road there. And the side that you would come across, you had to try to avoid the traffic lights on that side. So I hadn't seen that, but it does seem plausible that would have been the case.
Yeah. And how do you reflect, James, on the aftermath of what you witnessed?
Well, I mean, normally I'd be coming through about 5 minutes earlier than that. But for myself, fortunately, my bike lock on my bike wouldn't open it when I was getting on my bike at Chelmsford this morning, which meant I missed my train by about 2 minutes. So I reflect on it being very lucky. I'm really glad to hear that those cyclists aren't injured in any major way. And,
this is happened this morning.
Especially when you've got a young family at home. And pretty shook up, but I'm just glad that those people are okay.
Hello there. Well, let's just bring you right up to date on the very latest from here at Westminster, where the police are saying that a man in his 20s is now under arrest, being questioned on suspicion of terror offences. He's being held at a South London police station. That's after a vehicle collided with cyclists just outside the Palace of Westminster and then appeared to ram security barriers at the Palace of Westminster, and the man inside that vehicle, a silver Ford Fiesta, was very quickly arrested by armed police. Well, a number of eyewitnesses have talked a lot about the speed with which the armed police intervened and managed to take that man into custody. We can talk now to the former Commons Deputy Speaker, Nigel Evans, who's here with me, just outside the police cordon. All a little bit chaotic here, but this is as close as we can get to the Palace of Westminster. Nigel Evans, what are your thoughts? Were you here when it unfolded this morning?
No, I was doing the Julie Hartley Brewer show, and so of course they've got TV monitors there, and the story broke at about 7:30. I was with a Labour MP, Jim Fitzpatrick, and we were able to see where the vehicle was so that we knew that normally there would be police there, and that vehicle would have followed the route into the car park for the House of Lords. But clearly at 7:30 in the morning, and we're in recess, I'm not too sure whether there were any police there at that moment in time, but they were certainly there shortly afterwards, because we saw the number of armed police who are constantly now around the parliamentary estate. They were onto the scene incredibly quickly. But it's, led to chaos, clearly, for people who work in Parliament today. My staff are now all working from home, which is quite right. Safe for them to do it from home. But the only people who'd be in Parliament at 7:30 during a recess would be cleaners and people working in the restaurants. The chances of any members of Parliament or any members of government being on site is particularly scarce, I would say. And also, when he rammed into the barrier, where was he going to go next? It was a terrorist attack. Because if you got through that barrier, then the chances of him getting the vehicle any further is incredibly remote, because there's further barriers all the way along that route. So the security that is there clearly worked today, and I'm really grateful for the security forces for doing what they did. But clearly it's going to reignite debate as to the security of Parliament for the people who work there, and I'm sure that pedestrianisation of Parliament Square and which vehicles should be able to access so closely Parliament will be reignited. I'm absolutely certain about that.
And security was tightened after last year's attack at Westminster. This is the second, what appears, from what we know so far, the second attack in 2 years on the heart of British democracy. How worried are you about that?
Oh, very worried. And I know it's something that the Deputy Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, John Bercow, and others constantly look at as to, it's not just the security of our democracy, but you have to remember there are tens of thousands of people who work on the parliamentary estate, from whether it's cleaners to people who are working in restaurants to researchers, my own staff. It's all going to be looked at to make sure that people are able to go about their normal duties, and also for the British democracy, and that is home of
Or in the wake of what we saw last year, is London and perhaps the UK kind of almost prepared and bracing itself for possible terror attacks all the time?
Well, you have to. When I first got elected in 1992, we're talking 26 years ago, there weren't any of those barriers around Parliament as there are now. They're concreted, they're there to ensure that you can't ram raid, which is, for all intents and purposes, what this person tried this morning. And so security over a 26-year period has been stepped up bit by bit. And every time that there is an incident, they look again at it. And the tragic death of PCP Palmer on the parliamentary estate, along with the number of people who died on Westminster Bridge, has led to further security measures taking place, so that there is now basically an iron girder both sides of Westminster Bridge to ensure that vehicles cannot access the pavement anymore. So that protects the pedestrians walking about. So I'm sure again that they'll look again to see what is absolutely necessary. But I have to say, he was prevented from getting his vehicle any further than that first barrier, and for that we should be grateful, because that clearly worked. The police with armed machine guns, which you never saw in 1992, you now see as a regular occurrence, and they were able to be on the scene in a matter of minutes. And I think the speed with which they reacted is absolutely exemplary, and we should be grateful for what they've done.
And what would be your view if it was all pedestrianised around the Palace of Westminster and Parliament Square? Would that alter in some ways the nature of the heart of democracy? Is it important that vehicles can just drive past, or would that...
No, if they're a terrorist threat, then I think we need to look at it. And clearly, if you've got a vehicle packed full of explosives passing Parliament, which is then set off by a kamikaze person, then, that is a huge danger to everybody who works around our democracy. So I would say, yeah, let's look again to see which vehicles should be able to access very close to the parliamentary estate. And it may well be that, and Salavi, if it does protect our democracy, that we see no vehicle access other than very, very specialised for the disabled being able to access anywhere near the parliamentary building.
It does seem this man may have been on the radar of the security services. Are you confident they have the resources they need to keep an eye on all the people that they need to keep an eye on, which is potentially thousands or tens of thousands?
Yeah, well, it begs the question, doesn't it? I mean, that's almost an unanswerable question, because you can double and treble the amount of money being spent on that sort of intelligence, and still somebody will somehow or other slip under the radar. But clearly, we need to listen very carefully to the intelligence services to see what they're asking for, and we've got to make absolutely certain that they've got the resources to do the job, clearly heightened after recent events that we're asking them to do. We don't want to put their lives in any unnecessary danger than they already are in protecting Parliament.
I suppose the overwhelming sense this morning is a sense of relief in the sense that it could have been an awful lot worse. It could have been a bigger vehicle, there could have been more casualties, there could have been fatalities.
Yeah, it could have been a much bigger tragedy than was the case. Hopefully people who were knocked down have not been badly injured. Clearly some of them have been taken to hospital, but we just hope that they'll be fine. And yet we must be grateful that the systems that have been put in place because of other events seems to have worked, but let's look again to see what other measures we need to take to ensure that our democracy is properly protected.
Nigel Evans, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Let's just recap on the latest situation here. We're just at the police cordon, as we were saying, outside the Palace of Westminster, as close as we can get. It all began at 7:37 this morning. Let's just take you through the events of the morning as they did unfold there. And police are saying that this was a terror-related incident. There doesn't seem to be any doubt about that. It happened just outside the Palace of Westminster, as we say, at about 7:37 this morning, just as people were heading to work in central London. Now, the car, we gather, was a silver Ford Fiesta. It was travelling originally westbound past Parliament. It then suddenly swerved into eastbound traffic. It hit cyclists, then veered towards the security barriers, and that's where it came to a halt. Some eyewitnesses say it was travelling at about 40 miles an hour. Now, police at the scene arrested a man who they say was in his 20s. They're questioning him, they say, on suspicion of terrorism offences. He's being held at a South London police station. But all the eyewitnesses and the footage we've seen shows that armed police intervened very, very quickly indeed. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, has been saying her thoughts with the injured and thanking the emergency services for their immediate and courageous response. We know some of those injured were cyclists. They were stopped at traffic lights when the vehicle rammed into them. So a number of cyclists injured, but 2 people taken to hospital. We're just getting, I think, a statement as well from Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation trust on the casualties. Let me read that to you. Statement saying that 1 patient is being treated for non-life-threatening injuries at St Thomas's Hospital following this morning's incident in Westminster. Services in the hospital are operating as usual, but patients and visitors are advised to check with Transport for London and for road closures and travel disruption. And a statement, as we were saying, from the Prime Minister as well, praising the immediate and the courageous response of the security forces, of the armed police on the scene, very, very quickly indeed to make that arrest right outside the Palace of Westminster. Also saying that her thoughts are with those who are injured and who've been taken to hospital. And we gather there is going to be a meeting, as you would really expect, of the government's Cobra Emergency Committee. It always sits after any kind of terror attack or suspected terror attack. We gather that that is going to be at 2 o'clock this afternoon, so we'll keep you posted on that. And also we'll keep you posted on a statement we are expecting from New Scotland Yard imminently, with more details on exactly what has unfolded here at Westminster this morning. And we can hear now from one eyewitness who told BBC News what he saw, Barry Williams.
Well, I heard a commotion inside the road. They were parked, waiting for the lights to change. He hit the cyclist, then swerved over towards where the safety barrier is, where the police made sure cars go through, and accelerated and hit it at quite high speed.
What was your impression? Was it a deliberate act?
Well, it seemed to.
No,
I wasn't sure what he meant to hit the cyclist. They may just been in the way, but he accelerated hard towards the barrier.
This is all business.
And what was the reaction of the police at that point? What did you see?
Well, the police were very fast. They ported over the safety barrier and head towards the car, followed by obviously lots of arguments in the area. What also happened was the police started to do a cordon, but not only did police come towards it, police actually headed away to try and block off people walking towards it.
And what about the car? We saw video of armed officers encircling that vehicle.
Well, it was strange when it hit the barrel, of course. There was a lot of smoke, and it hit it with quite a jar. Actually,
We're going to interrupt there because that New Scotland Yard press conference is getting underway. Neil Basu from the Metropolitan Police, Assistant Commissioner. Let's listen in.
And what about you? What did you do?
well, obviously we were pushed back after the police first.
In front of the Houses of Parliament. That vehicle collided with cyclists and pedestrians before hitting a baronet and coming to a stop. 2 people have been taken to hospital. 1 man has already been discharged, and 1 man remains in hospital because of the serious but thankfully non-life-threatening injuries. Another man is at the scene and didn't require hospital treatment. The driver of the Fiesta, who was alone in the vehicle, was arrested at the scene by armed officers who were located nearby. The man is in his late 20s, arrested on suspicion of terrorism offences, and has been taken to a South London police station where he remains in custody. Given that this appears to be a deliberate act, the method, and this being an iconic site, we are treating it as a terrorist incident, and the investigation is being led by officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command. Officers have searched the vehicle and no other weapons have been found at this time. At this early stage of the investigation, no other suspects at the scene have been identified or reported to police. There is no intelligence at this time of further danger to Londoners or the rest of the UK connected to this incident. Our priority now is to formally establish the identity of the suspect and establish his motivation if we can. He is not currently cooperating. However, as you would expect, the Counter-Terrorism Command are making various other urgent inquiries to ensure that there is no outstanding risk to the public. Can I urge anyone who thinks that they may have information that could assist the investigation to call us on 0800 789 321. That's 0800 789 321. And thank you to the many people who have already come forward. And similarly, footage or images of this incident, you can download those to us via our website, ukpoliceimageappeal.co.uk.
Right. We're gonna leave it running for money to keep
Clearly,
fully.
we are treating the scene and Parliament Square as a crime scene. So cordons are likely to be in place for some time. As the investigation team continues to
I'm
carry
going
out
with
important
my
work
moving
to
effort to
establish
see.
what happens. I can appreciate this is a
Gonna get
great deal
a
of disruption this morning to
red
those who
pepper.
live, work or are visiting this area.
Trucks.
Thank you to the public for their
Keep-
patience and understanding whilst we deal with the incident.
So,
We will be
keep
working
watching.
as quickly and
This is for
diligently
you,
as possible
transporters,
in order
and
to reopen the area.
let's
So in
see.
the meantime,
Services.
I'd ask that the public try and avoid Parliament Square
Only.
and Westminster at this time.
And
The
people around the
safety of the
world.
public is always our top priority, and the Met Police will continue to do all that we can to protect the people of London. As always, the public should remain vigilant, and if you see anything suspicious or something that causes you concern, of course, please dial 999. So I'm happy to take a couple of questions. Assistant Commissioner. Right.
And then collided with the gate. Footage appears to show behind the car, 2 police vans. Is that the case?
No, I've heard that this morning. There wasn't a police car in pursuit of the vehicle. I believe it was an ambulance on the
Assistant Commissioner, the vehicle appears to drive deliberately at 2 police officers. Does it look as if the driver was targeting the police officers specifically?
We can't say that at this time. I mean, it certainly appears to be a deliberate act, but what the motivation is, we can't say.
Was it somebody that counter-terrorism police officers or the counter-extremism network was aware of before the man that you were in custody?
We haven't formally identified him yet, so it's too early to make that judgment. On the details that we have at the moment, we don't believe this person is known to either MI5 or counter-terrorism policing. And at that point, thank you very much for your patience.
So that was the Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Neil Basu there, who was just briefing the press on the latest. First of all, on the casualties, so 3 people, it seems, injured altogether after that vehicle collided with cyclists who we know were waiting at some traffic lights just across the road from the House of Westminster. And the police saying that one of those casualties is still being treated in a hospital at St Thomas's just across the river. Another's been discharged from hospital, and a third casualty was treated at the scene but didn't need to go to hospital. So it appears there were 3 casualties altogether, 2 taken to hospital and 1 is still in hospital, but not with serious injuries. Now, as for the man who's been arrested, well, the police are saying he's in his late 20s. He was arrested, seen by armed police, and has been taken to a South London police station. That's where he's being questioned. And the Assistant Commissioner was just saying there, the police are trying to find out, obviously, his identity and also his motivation for what happened here at the Palace of Westminster, but saying that at the moment he's not currently cooperating. In other words, he's not giving them any answers to their questions, but they are making a lot of inquiries. We heard from Daniel Sanford a little earlier on, our Home Affairs correspondent, saying it does appear that this man was on the radar of the security services. The police also saying that this whole area, which is clearly still in lockdown, is going to be still in lockdown for some time, yet the whole area around Parliament Square and Westminster roads sealed off. And the police saying they appreciate the disturbance to the public, but clearly there's a lot of forensic work that needs to be done right now and in the coming hours, maybe the coming days as well. Let's go back to Daniel Sanford, our Home Affairs correspondent, who was just listening to that news conference at New Scotland Yard. Daniel, what did we learn?
Important takeaway from that was the idea that the suspect, the man who was believed to be driving the vehicle at the time of the incident, is not cooperating. It's quite unusual for a senior officer to say that, but I think that gives you an idea that this wasn't a straightforward issue of him being taken to the police station saying, I made a terrible mistake and I'm really sorry that I fell asleep at the wheel. This is somebody who apparently is not answering questions, not cooperating with police officers, and Assistant Commissioner Neil Basu saying that they're still trying to formally identify him. As you say, it had been suggested to me that the man who was driving the vehicle is believed to have been on various lists of extremists, but Assistant Commissioner Neil Basu they're saying that he was not somebody who was known either to MI5 or counter-terrorism policing. So make of that what you will. It's not quite clear what sort of list he may have been on, but he does not appear to be somebody that was actively being investigated, certainly in recent years. So that's the sort of suggestion from that. But of course, at the moment, we've got somebody who's been arrested for driving the vehicle, arrested on suspicion of terrorism offences, but we have a stage of anybody being charged. So this is still quite an early day of the investigation. Because of the amount of video material that's around, it's fairly easy to see what happened, which appears to be a vehicle deliberately swerving, hitting cyclists, and driving towards police officers, and then smashing into a barrier outside one of the entrances to the House of Lords on the main road that runs past the side of Parliament. So clearly that is why police are treating this as a terrorist incident, and they currently have a suspect who's not cooperating.
Daniel, if we assume it was a terrorist incident, put it into a little bit of context for us, because clearly, a lot of people are very relieved that there were what appear to be relatively minor injuries to a small number of people, certainly no fatalities, and also that the vehicle used in this incident, a pretty small Ford Fiesta, it could have been so much bigger, and the whole incident could have been so much worse.
Well, let's go back to March the 22nd last year and the Westminster Bridge incident, in which a vehicle seemed to have taken the same path this vehicle did, coming over Westminster Bridge. On that occasion, it ploughed through pedestrians on the sides of the bridge, smashed into the railings on the side of Parliament. The man then went down, successfully stabbed a police officer to death before being shot by armed police. In comparison to that, this vehicle appears to have made one turn around Parliament Square, possibly swerved through cyclists, has not seriously injured anyone, certainly not killed anyone, and has been successfully arrested without any serious injuries to him. So it is a clearly much less serious incident. As you say, a small vehicle being used that clearly wasn't going to break through those huge barriers that are around Westminster. In fact, I've seen tests done by MI5 where huge trucks have been driven into these barriers without successfully breaking through. So I think it's unlikely that any vehicle would have been able to get through those very large barriers which were originally put in place to prevent chock bombs getting close to Parliament. So that was not an incident where the vehicle was likely to get through into Parliament, the grounds of Parliament itself, but clearly it could have easily killed somebody or seriously injured someone, and frankly it looks like it was more a question of luck that didn't happen than anything else, and we're in a situation where what could have been a very, very serious incident has turned out to be an incident in which one person is still in hospital and the suspect is in custody.
Daniel, just stay there for a moment. So I just want to remind viewers what we know so far is a man in his late 20s is being questioned by police. He's being held at a police station in South London, arrested after a vehicle appeared to be rammed into a number of cyclists. There were at least 3 people who were injured, one still in hospital, another discharged from hospital, and the vehicle, a silver Ford Fiesta, then ramming into the security barriers outside the Palace of Westminster. No details yet on whether this was a terror attack, but the police are saying they are treating it as a terror-related incident. That's the very latest from here outside the Palace of Westminster. Let's go back to Daniel Sanford, our Home Affairs correspondent. So Daniel, obviously all the questions now are whether this man, if this was a terror-related incident, whether this was a man operating alone, a sort of lone wolf as they're traditionally called, or part of some sort of plot. I mean, what is your instinct? You've covered a lot of these attacks, especially the ones last year. What is your gut instinct?
Well, certainly at this stage, there's a feeling that this is a sort of low-level incident. Obviously, it could have been incredibly serious, but it does look like it's part of some wider, enormous attack. But critically, police now need to find out everything they can about this driver, go through all of his social media, visit his address, and try and work out whether he was part of the wider network then.
Daniel, thank you very much indeed. Much more at the top of the hour with me here at Westminster. But now let's go and look at the weather with Simon King.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, we've got some sunny spells out there at the moment, particularly the further south and east you are. This is the scene at the moment in Cambridge. Those of you who've been to Cambridge familiar with punting, a fairly decent day for that, and that's not looking too bad at all. But we have got more cloud the further north and west you go, and you can see from the satellite imagery, we've got the top massive cloud here. That's just a weather system which is also producing some rain, moving its way through Northern Ireland and in through much of Scotland. It's a little bit heavy in places, but gradually throughout this afternoon it'll tend to just peter out a touch. Some of that patchy rain spreading its way into Cumbria and Northumberland and Durham. Further south though, remaining dry with those bright or sunny spells and feeling quite warm actually. Temperatures getting up to about 25 Celsius across the southeast. Further north and west about 18 to 20 degrees. As we go through this evening and tonight, there'll be some lengthy clear spells I think for England and Wales. The cloud always stay continuing in the far north and west, and that's because we've got this weather front which is still there as we go into Wednesday. High pressure across the south is just about holding on. It is slipping its way southward as this area low pressure further north and west drives in these weather fronts, and those will continue to move their way in. Quite a bit of rain, some showers for Scotland, Northern Ireland into Wales and northwest England throughout Wednesday. The further south and east it's going to be dry and brighter. Quite breezy though, especially in the northwest. We could see gusts of 30 or 40 miles an hour. All of us pretty much noticing a breezy day. And temperatures again 24, 25 degrees in the east and southeast. Something a little bit fresher further north and west. Now, weather front will continue to make very slow progress south and eastward as we go into Thursday. A narrow band of cloud and rain. Behind it, some clear spells before another band of rain starting to move into Northern Ireland and into the west of Scotland. During Thursday, though, that rain will continue for time, easing away to the southeast. Some sunny spells behind it, but a much fresher day for all of us. Those temperatures dropping by quite an amount. Bye-bye.
This is BBC News. I'm Ben Brown reporting live from Westminster, where a man in his 20s has been arrested by armed police after a vehicle collided with cyclists and then security barriers at the Palace of Westminster during the morning rush hour.
Given that this appears to be a deliberate act, the method, and this being an iconic site, we are treating it as a terrorist incident, and the investigation is being led by officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command. Officers are searching the vehicle and no other weapons have been found at this time.
The vehicle hit a number of cyclists. London Ambulance say they treated several people at the scene. One person is being treated in hospital still for non-life-threatening injuries.
It's very strange because once he hit the cyclist, he accelerated. You'd have thought he would try to put the brake across and accelerated towards the barrier.
He's going pretty fast in my opinion. I think it's a 20 miles to 30 miles per hour zone. He was going at maybe 40 to 50 miles per hour.
Armed police officers arrested a man at the scene. They say he's in his 20s. He's being questioned now in South London. The area is still in lockdown. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, has said her thoughts are with those who've been injured, and she thanked the emergency services for their immediate and courageous response. The government's Emergency Cobra Committee will meet this afternoon. Hello from Westminster. We're at the police cordon here after this morning's incident, which they say was terror-related. Just down the road there, a vehicle, a silver Ford Fiesta, at 7:37 this morning, at the peak of the morning rush hour, collided with cyclists and then hit security barriers outside the Palace of Westminster as well. Let's just talk you through exactly what happened. It was as people were heading in central London. Now, the car was travelling westbound past the Houses of Parliament when it swerved across onto the other side of the road into eastbound traffic, hitting security barriers. The whole area now cordoned off, and the police say that is likely to stay that way, that lockdown, for some time. Now, several cyclists were hit. It's understood they were waiting at traffic lights at the time. 3 people were treated at the scene. One woman is still in hospital, being treated at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital with serious but not life-threatening injuries. Now, the police are saying that they arrested a man who they say is in his late 20s. They are questioning him, they say, on suspicion of terrorism offences. But they say he's not cooperating. They're trying to establish his identity and his motivation, but he's refusing to answer their questions, and they say they haven't yet identified him, and that there's no intelligence at this time, they say, of any further danger to Londoners. Prime Minister has already tweeted with her thoughts, saying that her thoughts are with those who were injured in this what appears to have been a terror attack this morning. She has thanked the emergency services for what she calls their immediate and courageous response. As I say, a meeting of the government's Cobra Emergency Committee scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon, and in the meantime we've been getting an update from the Metropolitan Police Assistant Commissioner Neil Basu at New Scotland Yard.
At 7:37 a.m, a silver Ford Fiesta was involved in a collision in front of the Houses of Parliament. That vehicle collided with cyclists and pedestrians before hitting a barrier and coming to a stop. 2 people have been taken to hospital. One man has already been discharged, and one woman remains in hospital for serious but thankfully non-life-threatening injuries. Another man was also treated at the scene but didn't require hospital treatment. The driver of the Fiesta, who was alone in the vehicle, was arrested at the scene by armed officers who were already. The man is in his late 20s, been arrested on suspicion of terrorism offences and has been taken to a South London police station where he remains in custody. Given that this appears to be a deliberate act, the method, and this being an outside, we're treating it as a terrorist incident, and the investigation is being led by officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command. Officers are searching the vehicle, and no other weapons have been found at this time. At this early stage of the investigation, no other suspects at the scene have been identified or reported to police. There is no intelligence at this time of further danger to Londoners or the rest of the UK connected to this incident. Our priority now is to formally establish the identity of the suspect and establish his motivation if we can. He is not currently cooperating. However, as you would expect, detectives from the Counter-Terrorism Command are making various other urgent inquiries to ensure that there is no outstanding risk to the public.
So that's Assistant Neil Basu talking to the press a few minutes ago. Let's talk now to Peter Kerb, a former detective chief inspector with the Metropolitan Police. Thanks for being with us. So the police are saying they've got this man, or got a man in custody. They're trying to work out exactly who he is, why he did what he did, but he's not cooperating.
Unfortunately, that's not an unusual situation with suspects detained. They just come in and, like they do in TV drama, just immediately admit everything so you can get it solved in an hour. They will need to identify him. That will feed in very much so, almost totally so really, into the motivation in the absence of him explaining why he did it. I think the circumstances are such that it's plain that it wasn't just an ordinary traffic accident. I think that's near enough eliminated right now. If it's deliberate, therefore, the reason is why. And obviously that can range from terrorism at the top of the tree to a road rage incident or some sort of aggravated protest at the other end of the scale.
And the other question, of course, is whether, if this was a terror-related incident, was this a lone wolf, somebody operating just on their own, or was it part of any wider conspiracy?
Well, that will be the main reason why they need to get to the bottom of who he is and what the motivation is, because obviously any further threat doesn't come from him. He's now locked up, but it would come from anyone that's associated with him or any larger organisation that he's working with. And so it's really important that they do identify him. They will identify him at some point. They've got a number of starts for 10, the vehicle itself. Fingerprints and DNA, maybe no immediate hit, but maybe there'll be some way of tracing connections abroad or something like that. But of course, there are a number of lines of inquiry that they'll follow. We've got good footage of him. They may even be getting phone calls ringing up saying who he is. If anybody does recognise him or does recognise the vehicle, then the terrorism branch would really like a call from them, 0800 789 321.
And obviously, just down the road there where it happened behind us, a lot of forensic work going on right now to find out more about what happened.
Yeah, for sure. The scene is going to be examined in fine detail. The anti-terrorist branch do the same sort of examination as everybody else for any other type of major incident, but just to a far deeper degree. That will be confidential. It's unlikely to add anything other than anything in the vehicle that will identify him. The wider scene is unlikely to add anything in terms of either his identity or the motivation, so it's for future use in any proceedings.
What are your instincts about what happened here? I mean, clearly it could have been so much worse. That's the initial response of a lot of people. Relief, in a sense, that this wasn't on the scale of previous terror attacks that we saw last year, including the Westminster Bridge attack.
For sure, the officers that first responded to this, and we've seen footage of them arriving in two ARVs just within seconds of him crashing into the barrier, with weapons drawn, then calling him out of the vehicle, getting him out of the vehicle. Sure, if you've got a firearm, then you're protected against any knife or any gun that the person might have, to a certain extent. But of course, that vehicle could contain explosives or anything else, and that would have been running through their minds. So you've got a situation where you've got a vehicle you want to be further away from, but you've got a suspect that you've got to be close to deal with. And so that is just straightforward bravery and courage. We've heard the Prime Minister praising the emergency services. I'm afraid they don't believe a word she says after 8 years of the way she's treated them. The bottom line is we are seeing this day in, day out with officers, not just around terrorism, but around serious crime. They are behaving extremely bravely, and they're just not being rewarded for it.
And what does it say about security around the Palace of Westminster and the improvements that there have been since last year's attack here, that there was such a rapid response by those officers, but also that, you know, the security barriers clearly did their job as well?
The Palace of Westminster is probably one of the most secure places in the country, certainly in London. There are armed officers there all the time, although it was armed response vehicles that seem to be the primary sort of arrival of the armed response vehicles brought most of the armed officers to the scene today. But the barriers, yeah, they did their job. They stopped vehicles getting into premises. They are very effective in that. But of course, if you've got a vehicle with explosives in it, then if it went bang at the barriers, it's going to have just as devastating an effect as if it manages to get through.
Do you think there needs to be further improvements to security at Westminster? Some people are talking about pedestrianising the whole area, not allowing traffic anywhere near the Houses of Parliament.
It's impossible to protect against an attack. If somebody wants to attack a premises, then they will. If you protect that premises, then they'll just attack as close as they can get in. And the further you keep them away, then they're likely to have larger explosive devices. We've seen it in places like Afghanistan, where you've got the green zone. They have really secure perimeters to that, and all that happens is they bring a big truck bomb to that security point, get as far as they can, and if they get no further, they just blow it up at that point. And so you're not going to, you can protect the fabric of the building, but you're not going to prevent an attack.
Okay, Peter Kirkham, thank you very much for your time. Peter Kirkham there, former Detective Chief Inspector with the Metropolitan Police, giving his thoughts on what happened here at 7:37 this morning, the height of the morning rush hour, when this vehicle, a silver relatively small vehicle, this was a terror attack, apparently ramming into cyclists, swerving onto the other side of the road, hitting cyclists, then driving at speed, accelerating up to about 40 miles an hour, according to eyewitnesses, into the security barriers, and then the bonnet, the front of the car, completely crumpling, the airbag apparently blowing up as well, and then the armed police very quickly moving in just a few seconds later and making that arrest. And the man in his 20s, we gather, according to the police, being questioned at a police station in South London on terrorism-related suspicion of terrorism-related offences. Well, let's hear from an eyewitness who saw the events as they unfolded here outside the Palace of Westminster, Barry Williams.
Well, I heard a commotion and turned round to see a silver car heading towards the cyclists on the wrong side of the road. They were parked, waiting for the lights to change. He hit the cyclist, then swerved over towards where the safety barrier is, where the police make sure cars go through, and accelerated and hit it at quite high speed.
What was your impression? Was it a deliberate act?
Well, it seemed to. I wasn't sure whether he meant to hit the cyclist. They may have just been in the way, but he accelerated hard towards the barrier.
And what was the reaction of the police at that point? What did you see?
Well, the police were very fast. They pointed over the safety barrier and headed towards the car, followed by obviously lots of armed police who were in the area. What also happened was the police started to do a cordon. Not only did police come towards us, the police actually headed away to try and block off people walking towards us.
And what about the car? We saw video of armed officers encircling that vehicle.
Well, it was strange when it hit the barrier, of course. There was a lot of smoke, and it hit it with quite a jar. It actually came off the ground and landed again, because it's quite a light car. But we're not sure. It's, when they rushed to the scene, grabbed the bloke, but then they seemed to walk away.
And what about you? What did you do?
Well, obviously we were pushed back. After the police first got to the car, they then turned around and started to push us back towards where the lights were. And that's when I walked past and saw lots of pedestrians standing there, but also the cyclists. There was a few on the ground. Some were holding their arms. There's bikes everywhere.
And what about at the moment of the collision? Presumably, given events here in Westminster in the last year or two, a frightening moment.
Well, it was frightening, but that's why I was walking backwards, not actually standing too close to the car. You never shot what's in the car.
And there's a scene on the ground. The cyclists. Can you give us an idea of the numbers? The scene at that set of lights where the cyclists had been.
Well, there was about 10 cyclists waiting for the lights to change. I don't think he hit all of them. He hit about 4 or 5, and there was bikes everywhere. I was very impressed. One of the cyclists got up and started to chase the car.
Good heavens.
Yes. There was one laying on the ground which was being treated, and 2 or 3 were just sitting there holding their arms against posts.
And what was your sense of the motive, if there was one behind this? Could it have been an accident?
Well, if it was very strange, because once he hit the cyclist, he accelerated. We thought he hit the brakes on, he swerved and accelerated towards the barrier.
Unless he was trying to get away from the scene, perhaps?
It was a very bad driver then.
Yeah,
And-
that's enough.
Yeah, as someone who's worked in Westminster for a long time, you would of course have been around during the Westminster Bridge attack last year. What was going through your mind when you saw this incident?
Well, it looked a feeble one because it was clearly to drive up the barrier.
And the reaction of the police at that, they responded very quickly and in numbers.
They did, and all seemed well rehearsed. As I said, police ran towards the car, but also some ran away to actually stop people walking towards where the car was.
Well, that was Barry Williams, an eyewitness to what happened here at Westminster, talking to Mark Easton, our Home editor. The government's Cobra Emergencies Committee is going to be meeting at 2 o'clock this afternoon to discuss what happened here. We've heard from the police already that they are treating it as a terror-related incident and that the man they're questioning is being held on suspicion of terrorism offences. We've been hearing on behalf of the government from the Housing and Community Secretary, James Brokenshire.
Thoughts are with everyone who's been involved with this morning's incident, and I want to thank the emergency services for their response. This is being led by the police. The counter-terrorism police are leading the investigation for the Metropolitan Police, but they are keeping open-minded around this incident, and obviously the police will provide further updates as and when they're available.
And do you know whether it was deliberate or accidental and a man's been arrested on terror offences?
The police have obviously are leading the investigation. This is an ongoing incident. I can't offer further details. What I can obviously say is the Metropolitan Police's Counter-Terrorism Command leading on this. A man was detained outside of the Palace of Westminster. But the police are saying that we should keep open-minded in respect of what has occurred. But obviously our thoughts are very firmly with everyone caught up in this incident, those who have been injured, and our thoughts are very firmly with them.
That was James Brokenshire speaking on behalf of the government, the Housing and Communities Secretary. Well, the police have also been talking this morning. Let's hear from our Home Affairs correspondent, Daniel Sanford, who's at New Scotland Yard. What is the picture that the police are painting for us, Daniel?
The worst of the casualties. Another person's been discharged from hospital, another person treated at the scene. So thankfully we're in a situation where there's been an apparent attack on Westminster, but with nobody killed and only one person apparently seriously injured, and she's not suffering from life-threatening injuries. The Cobra Committee is meeting at 2 o'clock this afternoon, but it is a meeting at the level of officials only, so that means that ministers like the Home Secretary won't be attending at this stage. So that shows this is being treated as a moderately serious incident. This is because although this was, by all accounts, an attempt to attack Parliament, it hasn't been a very successful one, and we haven't got large-scale loss of life. Assistant Commissioner Neil Basu said to us that the man who's believed to be the driver of the vehicle in his late 20s, who is in custody, they are trying to identify that man, but he is not currently cooperating. So certainly we don't have a situation where the driver has been helpful with the police and given a helpful explanation as to what has happened, and therefore police don't know what his motivation was. We've gone from a situation where, when James Brokenshire was a situation where they're actually treating it as a terrorist incident. So that's their prime belief as to what the cause of this was, that this was a politically motivated attack on cyclists and pedestrians and on Parliament itself. Clearly the key thing in this investigation now is to work on the identity of that suspect, on the place where he lives and people that he knows, and also in this modern era on his social media and computer usage. And by going through his property, talking to people that he knows, and by going through all of his computer and smartphone memories, that is how police are likely to work out what was the reason why this man did deliberately drive his vehicle into Parliament, if that's indeed what he did. One other interesting thing at this early stage of the investigation, we believe the man's vehicle actually drove down this road, down Embankment, towards Parliament before turning right onto Bridge Street and then round Parliament Square, because we've seen some footage which shows him doing that some minutes before the incident. So it looks like after that he may have done at least one loop of Parliament Square itself. We're busy trying to look at footage ourselves to just be sure about that, but it does look as if he's at least done one circuit of Parliament Square before then driving off down towards the House of Lords entrance, where his vehicle eventually smashed into the barriers there after hitting the cyclists and pedestrians. And you see police officers jumping out of the way on that footage, so he may, of course, have been deliberately targeting police officers as well. So it does look like he might have done a bit of a circuit and a bit of a recce as he was going into this, what appears to be deliberate attack on Parliament.
And Daniel, we know that just down the road from where I am, they're doing forensic work, forensic tests at the scene where that vehicle, that silver Ford Fiesta, collided with the security barriers. And presumably they'll also be looking at all the various bits of footage, CCTV and mobile phone footage. But in the end, I guess they kind of know what happened. As you're suggesting, it's trying to find out the why rather than the what happened.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, how do you work out why it happened? First of all, did the driver say anything in the immediate aftermath? Are there eyewitnesses or the officers who very, very quickly responded who can give an account of anything that he said in that immediate aftermath? Because if you remember, after the Finsbury Park attack, for example, the driver of the vehicle, the Finsbury Park attack, gave quite a lot of quite detailed information in the immediate aftermath of that attack. So did this driver say anything immediately in the aftermath? Has he said anything at all, although police say he's not cooperating, has he said anything at all while he's being held in custody at Southwark Police Station? But then, if none of that produces anything, then it's all about any records that there are in his smartphone, his computers, any paper that can be found that either shows any kind of planning of this or that shows any kind of mindset, any kind of ideology that might give clues to the motivation. And that's the work that you can be assured to be going on now. I'd be incredibly surprised if there aren't at this moment police officers searching a property somewhere in the UK and getting hold of that material now. And so often people do travel with their smartphones, whether or not this driver was, but if he was travelling with a smartphone, and of course the police would have had that already. That was certainly the case of Khalid Massoud, who carried out the Westminster Bridge attack on March the 22nd last year. His smartphone was seized almost immediately.
Daniel, many thanks indeed. That's Daniel Sanford, our Home Affairs correspondent, with the very latest from News Scotland Yard. And in terms of the casualties, well, everybody's been saying what a relief it is that the casualties have been relatively light. When the vehicle hit cyclists, there were a number of injuries. We gather 3 people treated at the scene. 1 didn't need to go to hospital. 2 were taken to hospital. 1 has been discharged since then, but 1 is still in hospital, but not with serious or in any way life-threatening injuries. And meanwhile, that man in his late 20s, according to Metropolitan Police, still being questioned at a South London police station on suspicion of terror offences. That's the latest from here at Westminster. Back now to the studio.
Ben, thanks very much indeed. We will rejoin Ben at Westminster in just a moment or two's time, but we want to bring you some breaking news that's coming to us from a totally other part of the world. This news coming out of the northern Italian port city of Genoa, where apparently a section of a motorway bridge in the city has collapsed in stormy weather. You can see the pictures here, quite extraordinary. This viaduct which carries traffic on the A10 motorway in the city of Genoa. This large section, they reckon around 200 metres, has collapsed onto the urban area below. Talk of possibly railway tracks below as well. Eyewitnesses reporting that vehicles, cars and lorries may well have gone.
Was rammed into some cyclists and then into security barriers. I'm joined here now at the podium by former Metropolitan Police Chief Superintendent Del Babu, who was also used to run the security team for the police in the House of Commons, in the Houses of Parliament. So you can tell us a lot about security.
To vote, so you'll find when the bells go for the voting system, so essentially when they're warned, and they'll have offices around Westminster, and they'll rush in. Many of them come in taxis, So you'd have to really look at how the voting system is changed. And recently, when we've had some very, very tight votes around Brexit, people have been brought in ambulances. So, we still have the system in this country where you physically have to be present. So you'd have to really change that parliament system. And there has been a lot of talk about changing that system. But infrastructure is always going to be very, very difficult to deal with. And the key things are to make sure that we've got enough resources. And police resources have been reduced by 20%. Over the last few years, and I think we've seen the impact now when we've seen an increase in knife crime across the country, the impact of terrorism. Now, this takes a lot of police resources and people are trained. I think the other important element is the relationship that the authorities have with the Muslim community, and we've seen that the Muslim community have been very upset about the comments that Boris Johnson has made recently about the burqa, comparing women who wear the niqab to being looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. Not particularly helpful language when you're trying to build up relationships with the Muslim community. So I think we need to be looking at the issue about relationships, issue about how many police we have, and then we need to make sure we've got police officers from Muslim backgrounds in those key positions, and at the moment we don't have that. So that's a really, really important area for the police and the security services to consider.
Is there a measure of relief for this attack? If it was a terror attack, it could have been a lot worse and there could have been a lot more casualties.
Absolutely. I think the police have learnt a significant amount from previous attacks. So you now have barriers that protect pedestrians, there's barriers for cycle lanes. So I think that reduces the damage that somebody's going to be able to do with a vehicle. I think what we need to be looking at is how we can sort of look at this individual, look at what lessons we can learn. I mean, it's very, very early to say what his background is, what the security services knew about this individual. We should be making sure that we engage with the communities and learning lessons around stopping these incidents happening before they get to this stage.
Dal Babu, thank you very much indeed, former Metropolitan Police Chief Superintendent. And we can also speak now to Chris Phillips, who's on the line, who was a former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Chris Phillips, what are your thoughts after what appears to have been a terror attack here, a second terror attack in 2 years at the Palace of Westminster, but as we've been saying, with relatively low-level casualties, 3 people, it seems, injured, 1 still in hospital?
Well, I think we've been very lucky, and if you get away with a terrorist attack in any city centre that has these number of casualties, we've been tremendously lucky. And looking at the footage, it does appear that perhaps this person was on a recce situation and has decided, perhaps because of the ambulance behind him, to do something incredibly stupid. Now, we're never going to be able to have a complete protection against this type of attack. We mustn't start blaming people for saying things across the media. That's ridiculous. What we've got to do is to make sure that we've got the protection measures in place, but also we are picking up threats before they get to us. And we need to resource the police to make sure that they're able to do that.
Now, we've heard, Chris Phillips, that the police are obviously questioning the man that they have in custody at the moment, that they've arrested. They're saying he's not cooperating. Is it your gut feeling that this was somebody acting alone or maybe part of a wider conspiracy?
Well, I think that's the key message, and that's the key thing that the police are trying to establish at the moment. Of course, we're asking the police to investigate horrendous crimes with laws that really allow the suspect not to say anything at all. And what that does is push the police into having to deal with the social media, what the phone will tell them, the computer records, etc., in order to get the rationale behind this incident. Because whilst we're pretty convinced it's a terrorist attack, it may not be. But we're really asking the police to do a very difficult job. And luckily, as we saw, the number of casualties are very low. And it's very strange that you would choose this method of attack, because whilst it's a copycat attack, it's actually a very ineffectual one. And those barriers will stop any vehicle, even trucks, at 50 miles an hour. So you're not going to get through those unless the gate is actually open.
I just want to interrupt you. Let me just interrupt you for a moment, because we're just seeing a recovery vehicle just driving down along Millbank, along the embankment here, which we think is probably a vehicle that's perhaps going to recover the small silver Ford Fiesta car that was used in this attack. We're not 100% sure about that. That's a bit of speculation. But you can see with the flashing blue lights just driving down there to the Palace of Westminster.
and it looked like a recovery truck that is going to perhaps put that Ford Fiesta and take it away. A lot of forensic work being done there at the moment, and has been ever since the incident happened, really. It all happened at 7:37 this morning, and that Ford Fiesta colliding, first of all with cyclists, and then with the security barriers at high speed. So sorry to interrupt you there, Chris Phillips, but in terms of whether or not this man, this suspect, would have been on the security services radar, of course it's always, and we keep saying this, it's always so difficult, isn't it? Where if he wasn't, it's difficult because security services will be asked why he wasn't, and if he was, they'll be asked why didn't you have more manpower perhaps carrying out surveillance?
Yeah, and these are the difficult things for the police. Of course, I would be incredibly surprised if this person hasn't got a criminal record of some history tells us that's almost always the case. Whether or not that is calculated it remains to be seen. Sometimes it has been, sometimes it hasn't. I think you have to be realistic. This guy, until the moment he turned left, was not committing any criminal offences. He was just driving around London, as many people do every day of the week. The moment he turned left and knocked the cyclist over, he started committing criminal offences. And a very short while after that, he was arrested by police. So unless the police have got real intelligence that this guy is a complete danger, they won't be following him. Unless they've got some real intelligence that he is going to commit or about to commit a criminal terrorist attack, then they haven't got the resources to follow all these people. And we're talking 20 to 23,000 people that are in this sort of section of society that police are really worried about. And on top of that, 3,000 more people who are really concerned. So the police, we're asking them to do an impossible job, and they do the best they can with the resources that we give them as a society.
Does security around the Palace of Westminster need to be further tightened up, do you think?
Well, you're always going to have a gap in security. Whenever you have someone that's able to drive a car and there's pedestrians nearby, you've got big problems. The fact is this, that parliaments around the world, you cannot take your car close to the White House, as an example. Generally, parliaments are seen as iconic sites, ideal targets. We've seen that at the Palace of Westminster. And maybe actually moving vehicles further away from the scene is a good idea. And I know there's been talk for many years about pedestrianising the front of the palace and also the boat entrances at the back, so boats can get close to the rear of the palace. So all these things are continuously being thought through. It will have a knock-on effect to traffic in the capital, that's a fact. But sometimes you do have to use your common sense. If a location is going to be attacked regularly, then give it the best protection that you can.
Okay, Chris Phillips, thank you so much for your thoughts and analysis. Former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, Chris Phillips there. Well, we've also been here from New Scotland Yard, the Assistant Commissioner Neil Basu, Assistant Commissioner on Specialist Operations, briefed the press a short time ago.
At 7:37 a.m, a silver Ford Fiesta was involved in a collision in front of the Houses of Parliament. That vehicle collided with cyclists and pedestrians before hitting a barrier and coming to a stop. 2 people have been taken to hospital. 1 man has already been discharged, and 1 woman remains in hospital treated for serious but thankfully non-life-threatening injuries. Another man was also treated at the scene but didn't require hospital treatment. The driver of the Fiesta, who was alone in the vehicle, was arrested at the scene by armed officers already. The man is in his late 20s, arrested on suspicion of terrorism offences, and has been taken to a South London police station where he remains in custody. Given that this appears to be a deliberate act, the method, and this being an iconic site, we are treating it as a terrorist incident, and the investigation is being led by officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command. Officers are searching the vehicle and no other weapons have been found at this time. At this early stage of the investigation, no other suspects at the scene have been identified or reported to police. There is no intelligence at this time of further danger to Londoners or the rest of the UK connected to this incident. Our priority now is to formally establish the identity of the suspect and establish his motivation if we can. He is not currently cooperating. However, as you would expect, detectives from the Counter-Terrorism Command are making various other urgent inquiries to ensure that there is no outstanding risk to the public.
Well, that was the latest from New Scotland Yard a short time ago. We can speak now to Jason Williams, who saw what happened this morning. Jason, just tell us where you were and what you saw.
Yeah, I was basically coming from Westminster Bridge Road. I live in that area, and I've walked over Westminster Bridge, and then I'm on to Millbank, and I've seen House of Parliament, a man driving very fast at speed, erratically. He's hit the barriers, and then specialist police have come onto the scene within minutes. They've removed the man. I think he's been arrested, and now because I asked the police, what's going on, and they said, it's just an incident, but now I'm told it's actually being classified as terrorism. Yeah.
What was running through your mind when you saw?
I was thinking, oh no, not again. This happened last year, and I was thinking, no, not again. I'm a father of two. I've got two young sons, aged almost 7 and 5.5. Yeah, Noah and Elijah, and I'm just very, very worried and concerned about what's going on in the local area. I love this area. I've lived here for 44 years. Yeah, and that's it. Really, yeah.
The police seem to intervene really quickly.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. I commend the Met Police and the Specialist Police. I think this is the City of London Police. I think, yeah. So I commend them. Yeah.
And the vehicle itself, I mean, did you see it actually hit the crash barrier? What sort of speed was it travelling
at? About 40 to 50 miles per hour, yeah, in my opinion. I'm a driver myself, so yeah.
And what was the impact when it did hit that crash barrier?
I saw smoke coming from the engine, yeah. Or definitely the front of the car, yeah.
So it was quite an impact. And then how soon after that did the police move in and arrest the suspect?
I would say about between 10 to 20 minutes after, yeah.
10 to 20 seconds?
No, 10 to 15 minutes, in my opinion. Wrong, but, I don't think it was seconds. I'm talking about the Specialist Police. The police that were guarding Parliament, they were obviously there in seconds, yeah.
And we gather it also hit cyclists. Did you see that as well?
That, yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
You saw that as well?
Yeah, it was horrible, yeah.
So what happened there? I mean, the vehicle was swerved over.
He was swerving and driving erratically at speed, and he's hit a cyclist, yeah. That's what's happened. So is that cyclist okay?
Well, we gather 3 were injured, and one is still in hospital, but not serious injuries. That's what we're told.
Well, yeah, I pray that they're okay. It's not nice to be on your, people cycling to work, whatever, and they're getting hit by a terrorist. It's not acceptable. It needs to stop. Something needs to be done by government. I mean, I think they're having a laugh. They're attacking government. They're not. You know what I mean? They're going for government now. I'm not saying it should be in a tourist spot, which they've done, but it is a tourist spot consensually. But yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's just very, very difficult times. And we're now approaching 2019, and it's still, this has been going on now. These similar attacks have been going on for at least a year and a half, I believe. Yeah.
Jason Williams, eyewitness to what happened here this morning. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you very much for your time. Well, that is the latest, and as we were hearing earlier, that man in his late 20s still being questioned by police at a police station in South London. And one of those injured still in hospital, but not with serious or in any way life-threatening injuries. Another person who was in hospital has now been discharged. So an overwhelming sense really amongst the emergency services and people around Westminster of relief that this was a terror attack. It could have been so much worse. That's the latest from Westminster. Back to you in the studio.
Ben, thanks very much indeed, and we will of course return to Ben at Westminster shortly, but we do want to bring you up to date with other news from this morning. News just breaking in the last several people. The suspect is in his late 20s. Police say he had no weapons and there was no one else in the car with him. The Ford Fiesta car hit cyclists and pedestrians before crashing into a security barrier protecting the Palace of Westminster.
Given that this appears to be a deliberate act, the method, and this being an iconic site, we are treating it as a terrorist incident.
I'll be reporting live from the scene. Police say they are questioning the terror suspect at a police station in South London. So far, though, he is refusing to answer their questions about who he is and what were his motives.
On the programme this lunchtime, a motorway bridge has partially collapsed in the Italian city of Genoa, with dozens feared dead. The government says it is an immense tragedy. Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. A man's being held on suspicion of terror offences after a car collided with cyclists in Westminster. The vehicle ploughed into a security barrier near Old Palace Yard in front of the Houses of Parliament. Several people were taken to hospital and the area is still cordoned off. The man in custody is in his late 20s, and police said he's not cooperating with them. Theresa May has praised the rapid response of the emergency services and said her thoughts were with the people who've been hurt. The government's emergency Cobra committee is to meet this afternoon. Well, Ben Brown is in Westminster for us now. Ben.
Yeah, Rita, we're at the police cordon. It happened just down the road here. Now, this whole area of Westminster is still in lockdown. All the roads around the Palace of Westminster and Parliament Square still sealed off to traffic and to pedestrians. Of the people who were injured, only one is still in hospital, we're being told, and that person doesn't have serious injuries. So there is an overwhelming feeling of relief this lunchtime that what appears to be another terror attack in London was not worse. This report from Richard Lister.
Sirens wailing across Westminster as police converge on the car within seconds. Immediately after the crash, a moment of confusion as the car sits smoking at the barriers outside the House of Lords. Police start pushing people back. Armed officers, weapons drawn, swarm over to the car. Stage, they still don't know if this is an accident or an attack. The driver is pulled out. He's filmed standing quietly at the scene in handcuffs. Police confirm later he's been arrested on suspicion of terror offences. A BBC camera caught the progress of the silver Ford Fiesta making its way slowly around Parliament Square. But then the driver darts back onto the wrong side of the road, ploughing through several cyclists waiting for the lights to change. He appears to accelerate and then pulls into the parliamentary access lane, crashing into the barriers.
He was driving about, I'd say, at least 50 miles per hour. The guy, he seemed to be like focused. He wasn't panicked or anything.
But this is what he left in his wake. On the ground, one cyclist lies seriously injured and is treated by paramedics. 2 people were taken to hospital. A man retrieves the car's license plate. Another sits on the pavement in a state of shock. This man was with them when the car struck.
My initial reaction was to run after him just because I thought he was a errant car driver. And then as police said clear the area, it became more apparent that it was something more serious.
With the area cleared, police began their investigation. Sniffer dogs were brought in to tar for explosives. Police say no weapons were found, but they're treating this a terror attack.
Given that this appears to be a deliberate act, the method, and this being an iconic site, we are treating it as a terrorist incident, and the investigation is being led by officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command. There is no intelligence at this time of further danger to Londoners or the rest of the UK connected to this incident.
As one of the busiest parts of London remained on lockdown, the Prime Minister praised the courage of the emergency responders. The government, like everyone else, is waiting for a clearer picture to emerge of what happened here.
Our thoughts are with everyone who's been involved with this morning's incident, and I want to thank the emergency services for their response. This is being led by the police. The counter-terrorism police are leading the investigation for the Metropolitan Police, but they are keeping open-minded around this incident.
The police have still not formally identified the arrested man, thought to be in his 20s. They've said he's not cooperating with their investigation. Richard Lister, BBC News.
Well, our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford is at New Scotland Yard this afternoon. And Daniel, what is your sense? Does it look like this was perhaps a lone wolf operating by himself or part of a wider conspiracy?
It's very early to say. There's a sense here that it was a slightly low-level attack, though of course an attack on one of the most iconic sites in the country, and to a degree an unsuccessful attack, in that if the man who was driving his vehicle tried to kill anybody, he didn't succeed in doing that, and there is just the female cyclist who's seriously injured in hospital but not in a life-threatening condition. Obviously, police trying to work out exactly who this man is. He's not cooperating at the moment, they say. I understand that there is a belief that he's from the Birmingham area, and a lot of effort is being put into that. So we got a suspect possibly from Birmingham in the late 20s, not cooperating with police and detectively wanting to work out from his computers, his smartphone and from his home address if there's any signs of planning of this attack, and of course critically as well, whether there's any sign of him cooperating with others and whether he's therefore part of some wider group. But certainly at this stage we seem to have an unsuccessful terrorist attack on Westminster with the only suspect in custody.
All right, Daniel, thank you very much. Daniel Sanford, our Home Affairs correspondent. There is a meeting of the government's Cobra Emergency Committee shortly at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Also, there's been a lot of praise for the police, for the armed police, the speed and the bravery with which they intervened and made that arrest this morning. Security around the Palace of Westminster was intensifying last year. There are calls now perhaps for it to be further tightened, even pedestrianising the whole area, so that vehicles can't get anywhere near the Palace of Westminster. Rita, back to you.
Ben, thank you. Ben Brown there. Well, our security correspondent Frank Gardner is here with me now. Frank, in light of all the attacks that happened in the UK last year, how seriously is this one being taken?
Well, you saw from the reaction there that it was a very prompt and robust reaction by the police. So, in that sense, they took it very seriously. Armed police reacted immediately, saw them jumping over barriers. If you drive past the Palace of Westminster, you will see, if you know what to look for, armed police vehicles, which are basically mobile armories that are able to react very quickly. And this all stems back to the Mumbai attack of 10 years ago, 2008, where planners got together and realised that if a similar attack took place here in London, the police simply weren't ready for it at the time. They outgunned the police, and now at any one time in central London, the idea is that an armed police response vehicle can react within 8 minutes and on the scene. In this case, it was very, very early. At the moment, they still don't know exactly what the motivation of this man was. It could be that he's disturbed. Most importantly, was he directed by anybody else? We don't know that yet.
Frank, many thanks. England cricketer Ben Stokes has been found not guilty.
Detectives are investigating whether an incident in which a car hit pedestrians outside a mosque in London was an Islamophobic attack. Police say the incident has been treated as a possible hate crime after 3 people were struck by the vehicle in Cricklewood, North West London, with reports that those inside the car were making anti-Islamic taunts. Well, let's go now to Cricklewood. Our correspondent Keith Doyle is there, and just explain what's happened here.
At midnight this morning, the street here was full of hundreds of people who were leaving the Ashura commemorations, which were taking place in the building behind me. Some stewards from the centre approached a car that was parked nearby with 4 people in it. And then there was some sort of altercation. The police said the stewards were subjected to a tirade of Islamophobic and racist abuse. The car then drove off, it mounted the pavement, and it drove into a number of the people who were on the street here. The police have said that 2 people were seriously injured, but they're not in a critical condition. Here is the account of one eyewitness.
I saw the car driving like in crazy speed, so I was concerned about the people, so I was looking forward, backward, just to make sure no one on the street. So what I did, I ran toward the car, trying to move the people out of the road. So I managed to push a few people off the road, but the car, once he saw me, he tried to run me over. So I tried to move off the way, and then the car was that close to hit me, but I managed to move off the road. And I helped as well, like 2 people, and it was like terrifying, like I didn't know what to do.
The police say they are treating this as an Islamophobic and a hate crime, but at present they're not treating it as a terrorist incident. They are looking for the 4 people who were in the car, and they say they're putting measures to make sure that the rest of the commemorations pass off safely. Up to you.
Okay, Keith, thank you very much. Let's keep your correct order. You're watching Afternoon Live. Let's catch up with the weather.
One on the news, last week, police officer being killed after gunmen opened fire in a crowded bar in Los Angeles. Witnesses reported hearing more than 30 shots at the venue in the Thousand Oaks area, which was hosting a country music night. An officer who was responding to the incident was killed, and officials have also confirmed that the gunman is dead. CBS reporter Chris Martinez is near the scene in Thousand Oaks and gave us this update a short while ago.
Well, the latest numbers, as you've heard, 13 dead here. That includes the shooter. So we have 11 victims inside the bar. We have 1 sheriff's deputy who is killed, rushing into help, and then we have the shooter dead as well. They're also telling us that there's anywhere from 10 to 15, maybe more, injuries here that were related to this. Most, if not all of those, though, not gunshot related. So those are injuries that people sustained as they were trying to get out of the building. And we've heard from witnesses here, people who were inside, that it was a very frantic, mad rush to get out, as you might imagine. Some of them breaking windows on the 2nd floor and jumping out the window from the 2nd floor to get out. Once they realized what was actually happening here inside the very crowded bar, everyone was doing whatever they could to get out, helping one another get to safety, and also helping the wounded here get medical attention.
Dean is the sheriff for Ventura County, who told reporters what information investigators have so far.
Tonight at 11:20 p.m., Sheriff 911 received multiple calls of shots being fired at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks. Our first sheriff's unit arrived on scene. 3 minutes later, there was also 2 officers on scene who had been on a local traffic stop and heard the traffic and responded right away. Approximately 3 minutes later, a high patrol officer and a sheriff's sergeant made entry into the borderline because they heard shots being fired and felt there might be additional victims inside. Upon going through the front door, the sheriff's sergeant was struck multiple times with gunfire. A high patrol officer stepped back and secured the perimeter until additional units arrived, and he rescued the sheriff's sergeant out of the line of gunfire. When additional units arrived, including SWAT personnel, agencies from the Oxnard Police Department, the Senior Valley Police Department, the Ventura Police Department, and additional officers from the Higher Patrol, they made entry into the Borderline Bar and Grill. They found 11 victims that had been killed. The suspect, who we believe was the only suspect, was dead inside. And there were multiple other victims of different levels of injury inside that were rescued from the scene and taken to local hospitals. In addition to the victims inside, and the numbers are upwards of 10 to 12, additional victims with minor injuries fled the scene on their own and took themselves to local hospitals. We have not identified the suspect yet. Our partners from the FBI were on scene almost immediately to help us with the identification process and with crime scene processing. We have no idea if there is a terrorism link to this event or not. As you know, these are ongoing investigations, and that information will come out as soon as we're able to determine exactly who the suspect was and what motive he might have had for this horrific event. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. Well, Sergeant News, Sergeant passed away at the hospital about an hour. I only mention my guitarist because that's where we all go these days, and we have multiple shootings like this. There's no reason for it. We have this deaths. I have nothing to lead me to believe or the FBI that there is any terrorism link here, but we certainly will look at that option.
Sheriff Deputy Waters reporters, women who smoke put themselves more at risk of having a heart attack than... Hello, good morning to you and welcome to BBC News Live. I'm Anita Lefebvre. Police in the Australian city of Melbourne say they're treating as a terror incident a stabbing attack in the city centre. One person was stabbed to death and 2 others injured in the rush hour. Police opened fire on one man who was armed with a knife. It's believed he set a car on fire before attacking passers-by. In the story, which contains some disturbing images from the start, here's our Australia correspondent Howard Griffith.
Face to face with an armed attacker, officers confront a man brandishing a knife. He continued to swing at them until, moments later, they shot him in the chest. The police were called after reports of a vehicle on fire was being driven into the heart of the city's busy shopping district before bursting into flames. Gas canisters were later found at the scene. When the police arrived, they found members of the public had been attacked with a knife, one of them fatal.
3 people have been stabbed. Unfortunately, one is deceased at the scene. 2 other victims are currently at hospital. The bomb response unit have cordoned off the area. The MFB have extinguished the vehicle fire. The bomb response unit is now making the scene safe.
The city centre was cordoned off. People were warned by a new siren alert system to keep clear, and they were left in disbelief by what they witnessed.
There's been a lot of police officers that have looked a bit concerned. I've run into some friends here as well who are also concerned. Videos have emerged of the shooting, attempted stabbings and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite graphic, quite violent, and at the moment I guess the best way to describe it is just shock.
Counter-terrorism officers are now investigating. They say the man was known to them but was not on a terror watch list. Detectives say there's no ongoing threat. But Melbourne has become the latest city to face the question of whether more can be done to protect the public from sudden, chaotic acts of terror. However, BBC News.
Well, police have given a further update on the alleged attacker. Here's what they had to say.
What we know so far about the individual who was shot and was died at hospital. From what we know of the individual, we are treating this as a terrorist incident. We now know a bit more about the identity of that person. Initially, that person didn't have any identification on it, but we believe we now have information on the identity of that person. For operational reasons, we now have the counter-terrorism command and the homicide squad dealing with this matter. And the ongoing investigations being conducted by the counter-terrorism command, and accordingly, I'm not at liberty at this point to disclose the identity of that person. But with, as I say, we did have counter-terrorism investigations currently underway. In relation to that person, he is known to police. He's known to police mainly in respect to relatives that he has that are certainly persons of interest to us. And he's someone that accordingly is known to both Victoria Police and the federal intelligence authorities.
The latest from police in Melbourne. Here, the Democratic Unionist Party.
Hearing some reports on the Reuters news agency that an individual has been tasered by police or indeed held inside the grounds of Parliament in the last short while. Our political editor Laura Koonsberg is tweeting as well, intruder at Parliament being held by police. She says, not clear what happened, all seems calm now. So whatever has gone on, the incident has been dealt with fairly quickly, it seems. Some details emerging about a man being held, arguing with police. Laura Koonsberg says that he was on the ground when she first saw him, but was then on his feet in handcuffs, talking to officers. Some reports as well suggesting that someone was tasered. We don't have absolute clarity on that, but whatever was going on has been dealt with and contained. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Adam Fleming, who's in Brussels. Adam, Theresa May heading there later. We saw her just a second ago being greeted by Angela Merkel.
Yeah,
to reach the last 16 at Liverpool's expense. Commit.
Moment, and if he doesn't act now, he will indeed find more to risk.
For the meeting with Angela Merkel. What do you think her strategy is with all of this?
I think she cooperation there.
Ich bin traurig. It's so sad. It's a really, really sad situation, not just for the people in the United Kingdom, but also for us in the EU 27. And because we are very much interested in close and reliable relations to the United Kingdom, and I hope we can continue our very good cooperation and friendship.
And will Chancellor Merkel do anything to help today, or is it a waste of time?
It's always good to talk to each other.
So two things there. First of all, he wasn't incredibly enthusiastic about anything big coming out of that meeting that's about to happen in Berlin between Theresa May and Angela Merkel. And second of all, doesn't the body language speak volumes there? When I said, "Are you sick of us?" and he shrugged his shoulders, and it took him ages to find the words to describe how he actually felt. It does reflect a real sense of kind of Brexit fatigue that you pick up from people here in Brussels when you ask them about what's happening.
Yes, the body language does indeed speak volumes. Adam, thank you very much. Adam Fleming in Brussels. Let's just show you some shots from a camera looking down towards just very short distance from where we are, obviously, the car area around Parliament. Quite a melee of people coming and going there. You can see a police car parked halfway on the pavement, but we understand it's somewhere around this area that the individual we were talking about a few moments ago has been held by police. It follows some sort of words being exchanged. Our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, saying that she saw a man arguing with police. He was on the ground when she first saw him, and then was on his feet in handcuffs talking to officers. There was some suggestion also, some reports coming in that someone had been tasered. We can't absolutely clarify that, and that someone was within the grounds of Parliament, but whether they were inside the walls, inside the perimeter, or just outside, it's a little unclear at the moment. But just that view from that camera overlooking Parliament for you now. If we get any more details on that, of course, and we'll try to find out what exactly was going on there, whether it's one of the demonstrators. They've been out in force here at Westminster in recent weeks, whether it was one of those demonstrators that we simply don't know at the moment. We'll have more on today's main stories coming up for you on Newsroom Live here on the BBC News Channel, including much more on Brexit, of course. But right now, goodbye to viewers on BBC Two. And let's continue our Brexit coverage now with our assistant political editor, Norman Smith. So we haven't heard much about Theresa May's meeting with Mark Rutte. She's just arrived, as we saw a few moments ago, for the meeting with Angela Merkel. What do you think her strategy is with all of this?
Well, I think she knows she's not going to get any fundamental rewrite of the deal. That's been made pretty clear. I think she is sceptical about the risks involved in reopening it and whether it would just be a sort of open invitation for the EU to pile in and make a whole load of demands. So the best you can expect in terms of the deal, bluntly, is a bit of warm words around the margin to try and ease the concerns of Tory Brexiteers. Her greatest weapon, though, is time. and the fact that the clock is now ticking down to Brexit Day, and we've learned this morning that number 10 says she will come back with her meaningful vote before January the 21st. Now, that is not going to assuage her critics because that is still 6 weeks away, so there is the potential for Mrs May to drag this out for another 6 weeks before MPs actually get a say. That means when they vote, they are getting towards the buffers of exit day. There really is no more spare time to come up with some sort of plan B. So MPs will be forced to decide whether to go with Mrs May's deal or to risk no deal or potentially no Brexit. And I think bluntly her hope is that a number of MPs on both sides of the divide will crack, and you will have softer Brexiteers who will say, look, I really don't want to put Brexit at risk, I'll just go with Mrs May's deal. And you'll get former Remainers saying, cannot possibly risk no deal, we'll just go with Mrs May's deal. So time is Mrs May's key weapon to get this deal through.
And we have, though, the other view that we've always had from, indeed, some within the Conservative Party, from some within Labour, the SNP, the Greens, the Lib Dems and others, that there is an alternative to the options that Theresa May is setting out.
They are now...
I don't care. Fucking thing. No thing.
Like deliberate intention.
That is not... There's a random... A bit of... Leader. And back further on the deal till the new. So I can do chair and I.
Today. Let's get more on that situation around the gates of Parliament that we've been telling you about in the last short while, with reports that a man was tasered after a disturbance of some sort. I can talk now to Christopher Hope, who's the Chief Political Correspondent of the Daily Telegraph, and he joins me now on the line from the Houses of Parliament. And Christopher, I understand you saw some of this unfolding. Take us through what you saw.
That's right, Nisha. Well, the press gallery is really next to Big Ben, overlooks Parliament Square. And I heard a scream and then looked out the window, and then about half a dozen police officers who had pinned onto the arms were running towards a man who was, from my angle, behind the Christmas tree, that famous Christmas tree you see in New Palace Yard outside the House of Parliament. And then it appears the man was tasered. It's taken about a quarter of an hour for Parliament to get organised, but now they appear to have shut carriage gates, and the exit for people who work in the House of Commons is now through the House of Lords entrance. It looks, it was, obviously reminiscent of what happened last year when I'm afraid to say we saw the horror of the murder of PC Keys and all that. It appears to be contained now. There are armed police patrolling downstairs by the Christmas tree. I understand from colleagues on the ground that the man has now been put into a van and may be taken away. But it shows how on edge people can be here in the Palace of Westminster.
So for clarity's sake and for our viewers' sake, this was someone who was inside the perimeter of Parliament's grounds.
He appears to have got through the gates that the cars drive through and get into New Palace Yard, and he was tasered. Well, we think he was tasered inside the estate. That's right.
Yes, just I talked to you, Christopher, we've got some new pictures, some new images coming into us of an individual on the ground with several police officers around him, some other police officers standing nearby with batons at the ready, but this individual clearly contained by the officers who are holding him on the ground at the moment. And it is quite a melee down in that area, isn't it, Christopher? You have obviously all the normal comings and goings, lots of tourists, lots of demonstrators here because of Brexit as well.
Yes, it does feel febrile at the moment in Westminster, and this is another reminder that this place can feel a bit under siege sometimes. Maybe MPs feel under siege, and certainly this is an eruption on a a strange day as ever that they could do without.
Okay, Christopher, thank you very much, Christopher Hope from the Daily Telegraph, telling us what he saw. And our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, joined me on the line now, also saw some of this unfolding. Laura, tell us.
Anita, hello. I'm talking to you from Old Palace Yard, which is just inside the gates at the front of Westminster. So only 20 metres or so from Big Ben, or if you're not familiar with how the estate works. About 20 minutes ago, I was due to be coming into Parliament to talk to MPs about what's unfolding here politically. And when I arrived here, I saw a man on the ground. He'd been somehow brought to the ground by police. He was then held by his peer. There were a dozen or so police holding him.
Yes, that's
and he
all.
used to argue and shout at them. He saw police gathering up his belongings, what seemed to me like a passport and a few other bits and pieces that were taken, presumably as evidence by the police. And in the last few minutes, he's just been bundled into a police van and taken away. But obviously, huge sensitivities around all of this, not just because of the normal security concerns, but because this is almost precisely the spot where, of course, there was that terror attack where Keith Cramer actually lost his life when somebody made it into the parliamentary estate a while ago.
Laura, did you have any sense in the melee of what this man was shouting about? Was it anything to do with the Brexit demonstrations, or perhaps you didn't quite manage to hear that?
I couldn't hear anything what he was arguing or shouting about. He didn't have with him any sort of paraphernalia that would have suggested that he was associated with any one particular cause. He's the man who looks to be in his sort of late 20s or early 30s and has certainly caused a lot of commotion. But I'd say, to be completely clear, not obvious at all what he was trying to achieve, if he was trying to just mount some kind of protest or if he had more sinister motives. Just do not know that at this stage.
Okay, well, Laura, thank you very much for describing what you call Laura Koonsberg there, our political editor, talking about seeing an individual, a man, being dealt with by police after getting inside the perimeter of Parliament through gates which traffic normally comes through, and you can see from these images on your screen right now that individual being held on the ground by police officers. The situation contained. Of course, as we hear more, if we hear more about what unfolded there, we will let you know. But right now, let's return to Brexit-related business, and we can talk to John Tong, Professor John Tong, Professor of Politics at the University of Liverpool. Good to talk to you, as always, John. What do you make of where we're at right now? It's been an extraordinary hours or so, in a period when we've had so many extraordinary days.
Yeah, Theresa May identified the main problem correctly yesterday in her statement to the House of Commons. The backstop has always been the main problem. And the EU are not bluffing when they say that the treaty won't be amended. But there may be some scope for compromise, and this still possibility that some sort of addendum or some sort of appendix or some sort of new protocol could be added to the existing treaties, which would reassure
I can't believe.
taking their rage
is that they know that it will at the end have to come.
Shouting and then seeing officers surround a man. There was a lot of
In Europe, they spot check only 1.5% of all non-EU goods coming in, and they don't even do that at the border. So there is absolutely no requirement to have this ludicrous backstop pressed upon the UK. The European Union knows it, and so does Mr Varadkar, but he's playing a game for Irish policy that we were supposed to be giving. It just means that they need to agree that they won't go along with this and they'll have an open borders policy.
Ian Duncan-Smith.
Done. Fucking thing.
Just while we wait for that urgent question from Yvette Cooper, let me bring you this update from the Metropolitan Police in the last couple of minutes about that incident at Carriage Gates, just inside the perimeter. That incident at Carriage Gates. From the Metropolitan Police in the last couple of minutes.
Your own settlement, your own money that we were supposed to be giving you will not be coming across to the EU if you don't agree something. And it's not major, it's not massive, just means that they need to agree that they won't go along with this and they'll have an open borders policy.
Ian Duncan-Smith, just while we wait for that urgent question from Yvette Cooper, let me bring you this update from the Metropolitan Police in the last couple of minutes about that incident at Carriage Gates, just inside the perimeter of Parliament, where a man was arrested earlier. The Met say a man was arrested by Carriage Gates inside the Palace of Westminster on suspicion of trespassing on protected site. That was at around 11:55, just before midday. The police confirming that a taser was used, and the Met says inquiries into the circumstances continue. We've heard from our colleague Laura Ginsberg, our political editor, and other journalists about hearing a scream and shouting, and then seeing officers surround a man. There was a lot of shouting. But officers quickly contained the individual, held him on the ground. It has caused some disruption to normal business, but you can see there actually in that shot, that last shot, one of the officers holding a taser, armed police officers and also police officers with batons at the ready, containing this man very quickly. Memories of the attack on PC Keith Palmer, of course, the fatal attack on PC Keith Palmer, very much in everyone's minds as this incident unfolded today, although it sounds as though it was dealt with very, very quickly. We do not know what the circumstances of this incident were. Just to repeat that line from the Metropolitan Police, saying that inquiries into the circumstances continue. There are a lot of people around Parliament on a daily basis, demonstrators, tourists. We just don't know why this man was inside the grounds. He managed to get in through Carriage Gates, where cars normally come and go through, but security obviously a priority around the Palace of Westminster following last year's attack. But clearly there are perhaps weak spots that can be exploited, as today's incident seems to demonstrate. So those are the latest comments from the Metropolitan Police on that incident just before noon today at Carriage. It's inside the Palace of Westminster. We can go inside the House of Commons now with that urgent question from Yvette Cooper. Is happening.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I recognise that this question, which was the subject of much discussion and some speculation yesterday, and so I hope to be able to put honourable members confident that we
national security.
So can the Minister answer?
Brussels, from Berlin and Westminster, also this lunchtime. Police arrest a man who jumped over railings to get into the grounds of Parliament. Wages rise at their fast rate for almost a decade. 6 migrants are rescued from a dinghy in the Channel. The bank that likes to say no Barclays helps customers block their own cards to break addictive habits. And new evidence that even Antarctica's most stable glaciers are now melting.
And coming up later in the hour in the sports on BBC News, a big night for Liverpool and Tottenham in the Champions League. Napoli and Barcelona stand in the race.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. Theresa May has embarked on a whirlwind tour of European capitals. She tries to rescue her Brexit deal. The Prime Minister's been meeting the Dutch and German leaders amid warnings from her own backbenchers.
On the island of Ireland, Parliament doesn't like it. So the UK's junior Brexit minister was in Brussels with her new demands.
Good morning. She wants additional legal reassurances that the UK cannot be permanently trapped in the Irish backstop. That's been the issue all along, and that's the issue that's at the heart of the concerns expressed by many members of Parliament.
But EU countries say Mrs May agreed a year ago to the idea of special terms for North.
The UK to leave. Now there will be further talks, but I can't imagine where we can substantially change anything.
To give further clarification.
Go there and join our correspondent Jenny Hill. Jenny, what, if anything, can Angela
Merkel's going to give the negotiators? We've come up with a deal as visibility now of a no-deal Brexit business in Germany is.
All right, Jenny, thank you very much indeed. Jenny Hill there in Berlin. Well, here some Conservative backbenchers have renewed their demands for Mrs May to step down or face a leadership challenge. Opposition parties have called on Labour to force a vote of no confidence in Commons for MPs to vote.
Got a time and fear strategy, which is when Mrs May so will gravitate towards a deal, and former Remainers witnesses after the sort of travails and trauma of yesterday
improve the restored agreement so that we can get this agreement.
I don't meeting.
This morning we heard
this vote being
The question of preventing a new physical border in Ireland with the so-called backstop is perhaps the most controversial part of Prime Minister's deal with Brussels. The Democratic Unionist Party says the withdrawal agreement leaves Northern
Ireland's affected
Ireland, because this part of four parties who campaign to remain have come together with the joint message of back the backstop.
See it for them, not for us. The UK government is there to put our case.
Strategy.
This is a Prime Minister who just seems to find a brick wall.
So, what are Theresa May's options?
With a deal in March next year and entering a transition period. But if the deal was rejected or no vote took place, well, the default position is down there, leaving the EU with no deal at all. The warnings about what that could mean are becoming grimmer by the day. A lot of people will try very hard to avoid it, which leaves us with a host of potential options here, which could be filling all three screens within a few days. Could MPs suggest an alternative future deal, which enjoys a majority in the House of Commons? Should we expect a new Prime Minister, or a new general election, or another referendum, sending the deadlock in politics back to the people? Would that lead to no Brexit at all? All of these options are full of complications and would take time. And in truth, no one knows what's going to happen next, because Brexit has made all the old...
Father.
Chris Morris reporting. A man is being held by police after apparently trying to break into the grounds of Parliament. An eyewitness told the BBC the man jumped over railings before being detained. Well, our political correspondent Alex Forsyth is there for us right now. Alex, tell us what happened.
A report started emerging just before midday. The man had tried to gain access to the Houses of Parliament, and then images and some video footage appeared on social media of a man apparently being detained by police just inside carriage gates behind me here. And then shortly, a while later, the Metropolitan Police issued a statement in which they said a man had been arrested by carriage gates at this location on suspicion of trespassing on a protected site. That was around 5 to 12. He was inside the palace. A taser was deployed. The man, we understand, was led away in a police van, and inquiries continue. Now, security at this location was significantly stepped up after the Westminster Bridge attacks, which took place in March of last year. But the Met Scotland Yard says this incident that took place today is not being investigated by the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Command.
Alex, thank you very much indeed. Alex Forsyth, our political correspondent. Wages are rising. We'll talk to you later on, and Helen Willis has all the weather. Helen.
Hi Simon, hello, good afternoon. It's a fairly quiet weather picture at the moment. It looks as if the cold air will win the battle of the cold and mild weather for most of this week, but come the weekend, it looks very interesting. I'll have more for you later.
You tease. Talk to you later on. Now, also this hour, thinning ice in Antarctica. NASA says it's worse than we thought, prompting fears of sea levels rising significantly around the world. Everyone, this is Afternoon Live. I'm Simon McCoy, live in Westminster. Theresa May has embarked on a whirlwind tour of European capitals as she tries to rescue her Brexit deal. The Prime Minister has been meeting with Dutch and German leaders amid warnings from her own backbenchers that she'll need to win significant changes if her deal is to ever to get through the House of Commons. Later, she'll meet the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, who's already said there is no room whatsoever for renegotiation. Our Europe correspondent, David Grammaticus. That's the political scene here. If you've been watching, you'll know that this morning there was an incident inside the House of Parliament, just inside the gates here. We're just hearing an update from Scotland Yard. A man was arrested inside the grounds of the Palace of Westminster this morning. This happened just before midday here. He tried to gain entry to the grounds of the Palace of Westminster via carriage gates. And ran towards officers. He was told to comply with officers' requests to stop, failed to do so. Police say a taser was deployed. The man was subsequently arrested on suspicion of trespassing at a protected site and taken to a police station where he remains in custody. The arrested man will have a mental health assessment, and that investigation being led by officers from the Parliamentary Diplomatic Protection Team at Scotland Yard. So that's an update on those events just before midday here in the grounds of the Palace of Westminster behind me. You're watching Afternoon Live. Now, Coast Guards are picking
The French city of Strasbourg, that shots have been fired close to a Christmas market there in one of the central squares of Place Clébert. Police apparently have cordoned off the area, and trams have been stopped as well. There are unconfirmed reports, by the way, that 2 people were seen lying on the ground. So shots fired in Strasbourg Christmas market. We will bring you more on that as soon as we can get it.
Yeah,
Actually, I've been to that Christmas market, Kathy, many years ago. It's not far, actually, from the European Parliament.
You seem to have disappeared. You've done a miraculous thing, Christian.
You're trying to fade me out of this programme.
It's a bit like Harry Potter.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that I have been to that
You
Christmas
disapparate. Oh, look, there you are. Back your magic.
I was just going to say, though, I have been to that Christmas market. It's not far from the European Parliament. It's quite a busy Christmas market this time of year as well. And a changing Europe, who's probably been watching what's been going on across the road with some sense of bewilderment over the last 2 days.
Well, absolutely. On one level, nothing's happened. On another level, absolutely. On one level, nothing's happened. On another level, everything seems to be happening all at once. You have, as you just heard, a vote of no confidence being planned.
Crystal ball, what would it say?
Four that get ready to tell you what they are.
Who are writing on Twitter.
Are not really viable. Okay, and I'm always good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Let's bring you the latest on that incident we talked about earlier, the shooting in Strasbourg. Regional authorities are confirming that there is an ongoing incident there. Several people have been injured in Strasbourg. Shots have been fired. It's close to the Christmas market. It's one of the central squares, Place Kléber. There are various, as Christian said earlier, this is a place where there are lots of European members of parliament. An Italian member of parliament, Dario Tamburrano, has written that there had been shots fired in the crowd at a street. He sent this out on Twitter, and that there were people dead and wounded. That's an Italian member of parliament who is tweeting. There's a local journalist, Bruno Pussa, who's also tweeting, saying that there have been dozens of shots fired, one or two to begin with, and then in bursts. And a press officer for the European Parliament has also been tweeting, saying that there was panic in the centre following the sound of gunfire, and that police with guns are running through the streets. As you can see, we're getting most of our information here from people who work in the European Parliament who are writing on Twitter. As you said earlier, Christian, this is right next to the European Parliament, so they'd be able to see what was going on.
Yeah, it's not, as I remember, it's not a particularly big market. It looks like a very Germanic market, you know, lots of wood cabins, little tiny streets between the wood cabins, and as I say, very busy at this time of year. It is the sort of place that people gather, and of course, while the European Parliament is there, don't forget Jean-Claude Juncker was at the European Parliament today, so there would have been a full complement in the Parliament, and it brings in a lot of people into the city at the same time. I think we might be able to go to Brussels and speak to Gavin Lee, who also reports a lot from Strasbourg. What more are you able to tell us, Gavin, about what has happened?
Well, this is in Strasbourg city centre. In the last 40 minutes or so, the regional authority there has said that there is this ongoing incident. They described it in Strasbourg. Now, it's within the city centre. The old centre is where the Christmas markets are, where the reports of these incidents have taken place, shooting incidents. It's maybe 20 minutes from the European Parliament, where members of the European Parliament have been sitting this week. We're getting information coming from, as you mentioned, the fire service to Reuters news agency saying one person has been killed. There are 3 people injured. There's a journalist from a Finnish broadcaster. Obviously, they're there covering the events of the European Parliament. She has said that she's held inside a restaurant. She's told that to stay there. The police are outside. She said people here are very scared and confused. There is a press officer for the European Parliament as well. He's talking about the panic in the streets following the sound of gunfire, and the local journalist who has said that he lives above this small street close to the Christmas market where there were a number of shots fired. He says that there were up to a dozen shots fired in the street in the city centre. 1 or 2 shots fired at first and a burst of gunfire. So all we know from the police at the moment, from the regional authority, is that this is an ongoing incident, but clearly 1 person dead, 3 people injured. This is a deep concern, especially before Christmas time. Going back to what happened a couple of years ago, that concern of Berlin Christmas markets, but of course these things are entirely separate right now. We're just hearing this is the last 30 minutes or so.
So I was going to ask you about that, Gavin, because of course this is not the first time that there's been an attack on a Christmas market. There was that truck attack on a Christmas market in Berlin back in 2016. How much security would there be at somewhere like Place Kléber market there in Strasbourg?
Well, I've covered events, shootings, terrorist attacks as well since 2015, and the Paris attacks, then Brussels, Berlin, and Nice lorry attack as well. In terms of the standard and the response time, it has become almost a a very fast developed system, not just with the emergency services, have really made sure that any big centre, especially around Christmas time, often have cordons, particularly here in Belgium, but in Strasbourg as well, around main streets, big roads to stop cars, for example, going through. You often have a higher police presence on the streets in France, especially given they've only just stepped up on the emergency measures there, but there's still a high police presence. So I think in terms of the speed of the response, that's one thing that's probably to look out for. We are hearing this evening from one local journalist who has tweeted that he saw with his own eyes at the Christmas market, he claimed, that there were soldiers who shot a man dead who was attempting to attack them. Of course, this is one a journalist tweeted in the last few minutes saying that he saw this. I should go back to saying that the authorities are still saying this is an ongoing incident, but clearly a big concern.
I remember from my time in France that there were a number of terror investigations in Strasbourg. I mean, we shouldn't jump to conclusions, of course, but they have had problems, the French authorities, in Strasbourg before.
Yeah, I mean, separately, if we look at one issue, one possibility, but as you say, it might not necessarily be that. There have been raids related to the Paris attack in 2015 in Strasbourg, a number of raids with some of those linked to the Paris attacks back in 2015. This is an area where there is, going back to what Cathy was saying earlier, what's the level of police presence going to be like in security services? That is an area where, especially in the city, in one of the biggest cities in France, there will be a big security presence around there. But I think obviously the developments at the moment, we're being told these are ongoing. So I think through the programme, we'll keep you updated.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us then. We were seeing pictures there, by the way, that were being sent in to us from Strasbourg. The Chief Executive of Google, Sundar Pichai, is testifying at a congressional hearing today. Mr. Pichai is being questioned on transparency and filtering practices that are used by the internet.
Earlier this week, Google admitted a security breach which affected more than 52 million accounts on its Google Plus platform.
Fair to say that Mr. Answer to that, to considerate.
Took risks in pursuit of greater truths. Yes, and actually, Christian, in a time of Trump here in the United States, not actually trusting the conventional media anymore.
Okay, Regina Vaidyanathan, thanks very much for joining us on Times People, not Person, of the which Michael showed you there on the front page. There is more news coming in from Strasbourg. A local journalist, Camille Bersur, says that he saw the incident at the Strasbourg Christmas market unfold and that soldiers shot a man dead who was reportedly targeting them. Obviously, it seems to be a fluid situation coming in at the moment. The French authorities saying still, we should remind you that this is an ongoing situation, but we're getting these conflicting reports. It always happens in these kind of breaking news situations where we have people on the ground posting things on Twitter, and sometimes the news comes out quicker than it does actually from the authorities themselves, Christian.
Yeah, Place Kleber, right in the centre of Strasbourg, not very far from the European Parliament, which has been in session today. Jean-Claude Juncker was addressing the Parliament, so they would all be there in Strasbourg. And you can see there that the sort of pictures that we're getting in from Strasbourg, security forces checking streets, running down streets, lockdowns in many of these restaurants and cafes in the city centre. And of course, at the moment in France, a certain amount of turmoil with the protests that they've had in recent weeks. Security has been tight in city centres for very different reasons. But there you see those unfortunate scenes that we really didn't want to see again on the streets of France. Soldiers checking people, closing down streets, and all sorts of rumours going about of what has gone on there in Strasbourg. Certainly a number of injuries that we are hearing about.
Yeah, and it looks like the trams have also been stopped in the city centre. The area has been cordoned off, of course, because this is close to the European Parliament. There will be security in that region. In that area, they can respond quickly. And actually, some of the tweets that we're getting are from members of the European Parliament who either saw the incident or went out and saw it afterwards, who are saying that they saw this sense of people shots being fired. It's not exactly clear, we shouldn't say people, but shots were being fired. We don't know how many people were involved. We also don't know how many fatalities there may have been. It does look, from the French authorities' side, that they have rushed security into the area. Either the situation is ongoing or the shooter has been shot himself. We will bring you, of course, all of that as soon as we get a clarification on that Strasbourg shooting at the Christmas market there.
Hello. It certainly looks like our weather's taken a turn for the quieter at the start of this week, but the winds are going to pick up as the week now goes on, and it will feel colder as a result. But, well, let's just savour this beautiful view of the sunset in West Yorkshire today. Now, we've seen one weather front come in and grind to a halt across the UK. Here comes another as we go through tonight. The reason grinding to a halt, high pressure in Scandinavia, blocking them from heading any further east. So we end up with a lot of cloud across the UK, a bit of patchy rain, and as the next weather front comes into southwest England, Wales and Northern Ireland, some outbreaks of rain as we go through the night. Now, where we are clear overnight, and that's particularly towards eastern parts of England, there will be some here getting close to freezing for a touch of frost, but for many of us, we are a few degrees above freezing. Some fog patches are possible as well, where it's coldest overnight. Into tomorrow then, and 2 weak weather fronts across the UK, so areas of cloud, some patchy rain, more especially towards the east of Northern Ireland, westernmost parts of Scotland, West Wales, into Cornwall and Devon. There will be the further east you are, particularly across the eastern side of England, increasing sunny spells through the day. Now the breeze does start to freshen a little, it'll feel a little chilly in the house today, but it's really as we go into Thursday, high pressure there it is in Scandinavia, so around that we get a stronger southeasterly wind, importing colder air, and it feels colder still because of the strength of the wind on Thursday, so wind chill becomes more of a factor. Now, there will be a lot of dry weather around, maybe the odd light shower here and there, and there will be some sunny spells, but I think the thing we'll notice most about today is the strength of that southeasterly wind, and how much colder it will feel than these temperatures might suggest. Now, they've already come down a bit, as I mentioned, already we have colder air coming in, but the strength of the wind, it'll feel colder still, it'll feel like it is closer to freezing. Now that wind is a little lighter by the time we get to Friday. Still though it is chilly, plenty of dry weather around. But then as we go into the weekend, notice the change here, the winds pick up again. For some of us it turns a bit milder, but the main thing to talk about going into the weekend is the real mess of a weather system coming in from the Atlantic. So windy weather, but wet weather pushing north and east and into colder air on its leading edge. There could be a bit of snow to keep you up there.
Up next, all the latest national and international stories, and at 9, it's Outside Source with an interactive take on the world. On the BBC.
When was it? Okay, get corner. Get corner up, please.
This is BBC News. I'm Sean Labour. Headlines at 8. The shots have been heard close to a Christmas market in Strasbourg in France. French authorities say at least one person is dead, several are injured. She's made on a rapid tour of European capitals, including Brussels, where she's been meeting leaders and officials and asked for fresh assurances on her Brexit deal.
What has been shown to me from those meetings is that there is a shared determination to deal with this issue and address this.
Meeting. That's funny.
journey in the last month. Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola has hailed Raheem Sterling as an incredible human being, confronting racism in football after the pair was allegedly racially abused during City's Premier League match Chelsea on Saturday.
20 minutos. Can I have it again? Now you will get this one.
Hello, very good evening to you. Welcome to BBC News. We start this hour with some breaking news. Reports that at least one person has died after a shooting in the city of Strasbourg, close to a Christmas market. Our correspondent Sophie Long has been following developments, of which there have not been many, Sophie. This has just come into us.
Yeah, you're right. In the last hour or so, we're getting in the centre of Strasbourg. Now, we have now had it confirmed by the French authorities that one person has been killed and at least 3 others have been injured. So that's coming from the regional authority and also confirmed by the local fire department there. Now, as you can imagine, a lot of traffic on Twitter about this. One Italian MEP has tweeted, he wrote that there had been shots fired in the crowd at a street market and that there were people dead and wounded. Some pretty chilling videos on Twitter as well. We can see people seeing cower on the floor and running away in fear. There's also pictures of armed police that are making their way to the city centre tonight. So a Christmas market there, as you can imagine, it's 10th of December. Very busy time of year for them. Another local journalist who actually lives on a street in the city centre has said that there were a dozen shots fired, 1 or 2 to begin with, and then they came in bursts. Another press officer for the European Parliament, this is all taking place, of course, when the European Parliament in Strasbourg is sitting, wrote that there was panic in the centre following the sound of gunfire and that police with guns are running through the streets. So what we know at the moment is this is very much an ongoing incident, but we do know that one person, it seems, has been killed and at least 3 others injured.
Sophie, thank you very much. Well, let's talk now to the Labour MEP Richard Corbett, who's in a restaurant in Strasbourg near where the incident happened. Richard, good to speak to you again this evening, despite these circumstances. What did you see in here?
Well, I'd just come into the town centre and I noticed there was a lot of commotion. There is the Christmas market on. I wasn't sure what that was about. And I got to the restaurant and it was actually locked. You couldn't get in, and I thought this is odd. And then somebody inside saw me and they let me in and immediately locked the door. It's just an Italian restaurant where you're going to have pizza and so on. Everything around here is apparently locked down. People are not being allowed out onto the street for understandable reasons. And the talk here is that there's some rumours say 1 dead, some say 3 dead, and apparently it's a lone gunman, but even that we are uncertain of.
Indeed, as inevitably the case in a lot of these circumstances so early after they've taken place. But as far as you can tell from inside then, there's kind of what activity there was has started to die down?
Well, the streets are empty. People have been asked to vacate the streets, to stay inside. Indeed, I've heard from reports that nearby department stores, people are locked in, be moved up to the 5th floor for safety. Any hotels, restaurants, all the doors are locked, keeping people inside. And indeed, in the European Parliament itself, people have been asked not to leave, but to stay in the European Parliament.
Richard Corbett, MEP, thank you very much. I hope the lockdown ends as soon as it can, but and hopefully your evening starts to be a bit more peaceful. Thanks very much for that update. Well, let's talk now to Peter Fritz, an eyewitness to the shooting in Strasbourg. Peter, you've been you took some of the footage that we've been showing here on BBC News. What were you able to see and hear, and what sort of time did these events take place?
Well, what I heard shortly after 8 p.m., I should say, were 2 distinct gunshots and people fleeing the place. Now, I wasn't sure these were actually gunshots, and I went around the corner and I saw a person with apparently 2 shots into the head lying on the bridge here. We tried to engage in resuscitation activities. We took him into a restaurant, which I'm in right now. and we tried for 45 minutes to resuscitate him. There are no ambulance services apparently able to enter the area. Everybody told us that the ambulances have been called, but so far no sign, just some police people cordoning off the area. And after 45 minutes, we stopped the resuscitation efforts because the doctor told us over the phone that it's senseless.
That must have been a very distressing experience for all of you there. Can you tell us anything at all about the victim?
Yeah, or not. This got,
He's a tourist from Thailand, apparently in his 30s, accompanied by his girlfriend or wife. Other than that, I can tell you what's happening, but he's definitely a foreigner, a tourist who, like so many people, came to see the Christmas market in Strasbourg.
It's a spectacular sight in your city, and one that, particularly at this time of year, would be very, very busy so close to Christmas. And presumably, I mean, from what Richard Corbett, the MEP, was telling us, the streets now practically deserted.
Yes, they surely have an evacuation plan in place for events like these, and this plan apparently seems to have functioned pretty well. The streets are cleared out, the streets are empty, but the downside is that even the ambulance services can't enter the area, apparently. We've waited for, as I told you, 45 minutes for some medical personnel to show up, and there was no help, and now we could do nothing but cover up the poor victim's face, and for all practical purposes, we'll agree that he won't be alive anymore.
This is, I'm sure, an evening you won't forget, and a very distressing one for you and those who are there, and I'm sure that everybody would appreciate how hard you tried to help that man who has sadly fallen victim to this shooting. Peter, thank you very much for speaking to us on BBC News this evening. Let's just take a look at the live pictures now we're getting from Strasbourg as camera crews have arrived in the city centre. This incident, as Peter Fritz was explaining, took place just after 8 o'clock local time, so just after 7 o'clock UK time. And we can see that the military presence as well as police presence was pretty swift. Of course, there's a certain amount of police presence because of the European Parliament being in session, but many French cities have been on alert really since the state of emergency a couple of years ago after the terrible terrorist incidents in Paris. We of course do not know what causes of the shooting. We do know that one person is dead. We've heard that, as you heard from Peter Fritz, who was there, who was part of the group of people desperately trying to save his life. So a very sad end for that man. We are waiting for new information. Reuters news agency are quoting the French police are saying that one person is dead, 6 are injured in gunshot attack in Strasbourg. French police sources are telling Reuters that the gunman could still be on the run. There had originally been reports that the gunman had been shot dead. It seems now, from what Mr. Fritz was telling us, that it's most likely that that was an innocent tourist caught up in these terrible events. We'll bring you more from Strasbourg during the course of this evening here on BBC News. Now, the Prime Minister has been holding talks with European leaders and officials. Prime Minister's journey across the European continent and has sent this report. The chairman of the 1922 committee. Let's get the thoughts now of the Conservative MP George Freeman, who's in our Westminster studio. hear now about something else. That's the meeting the Prime Minister is going to have in Dublin tomorrow with Irish counterpart, the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. Sean Kelly is a Fine Gael MEP and he's in Strasbourg now. Sean, thanks very much for being on stand, indeed waiting while we talked about those other developments in Strasbourg this evening. Let's talk about the prospects of any kind of change in terms of the wording that might give the UK reassurance of the Irish backstop as it's.
It is a big...
Is Dr. Gabriel Walker, who specialises in climate change. In the centre of Strasbourg. This is in the French Raheem Sterling as an incredible human being confronting racism in football. The player was allegedly racially abused during the City Premier League match at Stamford Bridge on Saturday. Right, let's return now to our top story this hour. The news that came into us shortly before we came on air at 8 o'clock that at least one person had died in a shooting in the centre of Strasbourg. 3 people are known to have been injured. This is in the French city close to the Christmas market. The area has been in lockdown over the last hour, with people told to stay indoors and if possible move to upper floors in case the gunman was still at large. Let's talk to Ben Freeman, who's trapped inside a bar nearby. Ben, you're still locked in there?
Yeah, we are, yeah. How would you do a trap? We're locked in for our own safety, I think, at the moment.
Indeed. What were you inside the bar when the shots were fired?
Yeah, so we're about 200-300 metres from where the incident happened, from what I can tell. And really, I mean, we all now upstairs in the bar rather than downstairs.
Yeah.
The bar downstairs is a bit safer. So the bar manager's just shouting at us, but it's all fine, I think.
So you might be able to about to get the all clear.
No, so just tell them to make friends with all our French.
Sorry, forgive me. I thought you said you were saying it was all fine. Well, look, so you're inside. Is there still activity on the streets as far as you're able to see? Any signs of police?
There seems to be. Well, like I say, Strasbourg very narrow streets, very confined spaces, and we can't see much on the streets at all. Really, it's pretty dead for an evening on the street, which isn't unsurprising given circumstances.
No, quite. Absolutely. Well, look, you better get yourself another drink in that case. You could be in there for a while. Thanks very much, Ben. Keep safe.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
On the line also is James Fraley. James is a journalist for France 24. He was in the area when the incident happened. James, what have you seen and heard?
Yeah, so I've been in the centre of Strasbourg for the past hour, just after the gunshots were heard close to the Christmas market, which is, of course, a big tourist attraction at this time of year. What I can tell you is that police are now evacuating the city centre, and they're telling all residents to stay indoors. Unconfirmed media reports at this time, according to the French TV channel BFM TV, that the gunman is still on the loose. I can confirm that 2 people have been injured. Police officers did confirm that to me earlier, and I've seen 2 victims who have been taken away for medical treatment.
James, we were talking to somebody in a restaurant at the top of the hour who
was involved in unsuccessful attempts to save the life of a Thai tourist. Presumably nothing has been specifically said about that, although the local prefecture is quoted by Reuters news agency as saying government kills 1, injures 10 in shooting in central Strasbourg. Judging by what you're seeing, given the police activity on the streets, they don't think this incident is over.
I mean, I'd be careful about speculating, but indeed there is a huge police presence out here in Strasbourg. As I say, all the central roads are being blocked off as we speak, and police are encouraging tourists and indeed members of the press to get away from where the incident has taken place as soon as possible. What I can tell you, about 30 minutes ago, I saw military officers also walking through the street, heavily armed. This, of course, because France has been at a state of high terror alert over the past few months with regards to the recent terror attacks that have taken place on French soil. But, of course, as I say, no confirmation as to the motive or any further details about this incident.
Indeed. James Frenick of France 24, thank you very much for filling us in on the latest there, and indeed keep safe yourself. Thank you. Let's just stay with the pictures from Strasbourg for just a few moments more to confirm what we know. And it is limited information, but we know that one person is dead after a shooting close to the Christmas market in Strasbourg. You can see the signs indicating the entrance there. As James was saying, these are narrow streets around the old part of Strasbourg, beautiful city in eastern France. The European Parliament is in session there, so there would have been quite a lot of security anyway, but obviously stepped up once news of this shooting emerged. It was about an hour and 40 minutes ago now that the first reports appeared, so a little after 8 o'clock local time, 7 o'clock UK time. We understand from one eyewitness that a tourist may have been the victim. There had been some unconfirmed reports that the gunman had been shot, but as James was indicating, people are being encouraged to evacuate and leave. Now, whether that means the gunman is still at large or that they fear there may be others involved in this incident is not clear. There is no official confirmation of that. We do know, though, that President Macron cut short a meeting after being informed of the shooting in Strasbourg. He is being kept informed of the update, and he has dispatched the Interior Minister, Christophe Castaner, to Strasbourg on his behalf. That's quoting of the official, an official at the Elysee Palace, the President's official residence, talking to journalists in the last few moments. Let me bring you. Let's move on now to what would have been our top story this evening, had the vote not been deferred in Parliament, was due to take place instead. About the prospects of a vote of no confidence in her leadership. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Ben Wright, who is at Westminster now. Tomorrow, immediately after Prime Minister's question, so that would be lunchtime tomorrow. And of course, if we get any more from Sir Graham Brady or from anyone else who could be down the street, we'll bring it to you here on BBC News. Now, let's turn away for now to other news. And 6 people claiming to be migrants for Iran continue to rise at record levels, but unemployment is also up. Our economics correspondent Andy Verity
Christmas. That's great news. The average wage is now here. We can afford to buy more than we've been able to since 2011. If the glass is half empty, though, the average wage bought more than it does now before 2011. The other big question is, who's taking the new jobs? Well, on the latest figures, there were 132,000 fewer EU workers in the UK than there were a year ago, whereas the number of UK nationals in the workforce grew by 400,000.
38,000. Now, some of that's pensioners working in retirement. There's also been a big drop in the number of people who are economically inactive. In other words, people of working age, such as stay-at-home mums and dads and students who aren't looking for work. As a proportion of the population, that group is now smaller than it's been since records began back in 1971.
Andy Verity, let's return now to our top story this hour, and that's of the shooting in Strasbourg in the east of France near the city's Christmas market. The latest news we have from the local prefecture in a statement they've put out, which is being quoted by Reuters news agency, is that central Strasbourg is in lockdown still this evening. This is almost 2 hours after the shooting, in which a gunman shot dead a man who we believe was a tourist from Thailand and injured. That's according to one of the eyewitnesses at the scene who was involved in efforts to save his life. Unsuccessful efforts, sadly. He has injured 10 other people, and the prefecture says that the gunman has been identified and is being chased in the centre of the city. That is the latest we have from Strasbourg. One person dead, 10 others are believed to have been injured. We have a ongoing incident in Strasbourg in eastern France after a shooting just under 2 hours ago in the Christmas market. A gunman is reported by the local prefecture to have been identified, but is still on run. And our other main story, latest development tonight, is with Brexit and with the future of the Prime Minister. Our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, is reporting that Sir Graham Brady MP, who is the chairman of the 1922 committee, has requested a meeting with the Prime Minister to take place tomorrow. Now, this follows speculation, and I should stress it is only speculation, that the full Prime Minister, which
Hello, Mosaikins. Welcome to Outside the Source. Straight to Strasbourg, where there's a developing situation with reports of gunshots, of one person losing their life, and of several people being injured close to a Christmas market and relatively close to the European Parliament. We'll update you on the whole story. Prime Minister Theresa May has been travelling around Europe, first to The Hague, then to Berlin to see Angela Merkel, and then on to Brussels. She wants the European Union to address those concerns some British MPs have with the plan for the Irish border after Brexit. But wherever she went, she heard the same message.
The deal we have achieved is the best deal possible. It's the only deal.
48 letters have... So we will turn to Brexit and the pressure on Theresa May, particularly these reports that the requisite number of letters have been reached for a no-confidence vote to be triggered against the Prime Minister. We'll turn to that in a few minutes because we must first of all update you on what's happening in Strasbourg in the east of France. There's been a shooting at a Christmas market. Early reports are that one person is dead, 10 are wounded, and the gunman is on the run. We are getting other reports that the death toll could be 2, though that isn't confirmed. This is, as you can see, wire copy that's come in saying 1 person dead, 6 people injured, and all in the eastern city of Strasbourg. The suspected gunman is on the run. This is crucial, though. It came in a few minutes ago, saying the police have identified the gunman, but they continue to search for him or her. We're also told by the office of Emmanuel Macron that the president's being kept informed, and we know that his interior minister has been sent to Strasbourg to oversee the operation. Now, if we go much more closely on the satellite image of Strasbourg, we've highlighted Clever Square, or Place Clever as it's known locally. This is where you'll find one of the world's biggest and best known Christmas markets. Hundreds of thousands of people will visit at some point during the festive season. It's about 3 kilometres away from the European Union building. This is Google Street View, which gives you an idea of what the square will look like on a regular day, but it would have been much more busy than this. Where we are at the moment is that police have cordoned off the area, trams have been stopped. We have these unconfirmed reports that 2 people were seen lying on the ground. That's not been confirmed by the authorities. This is also important. This was from the Secretary General of the Strasbourg-based Council of Europe. He's saying, the police informed me of the shooting. The perpetrator is still on the run. This is a serious incident. I advise all staff and visitors to stay at home or indoors at the moment. And that certainly echoes what we've heard from a number of different authorities. The advice for everyone in the centre of the city is stay where you are and don't go outside. So we're working on this in the BBC Newsroom in London. Gavin Lee and his colleagues in the BBC Newsroom in Brussels are also working on the story. Gavin, tell us the latest things you've got, please.
Well, the official police and the local authorities in Strasbourg is that 1 person has died, at least 10 people injured, but in the past couple of minutes, Reuters, AFP, the big news agencies, and also French TV are reporting that 2 people have died, 10 people injured. It's fast moving. This started 2 hours ago, 8 o'clock local time, where there were first sort of bursts of gunfire heard, and around the Christmas markets, you say, Square Clever, Place Clever was the area where they were heard. A number of journalists, because this area at this time of year full of journalists, because the European market, as you mentioned, is very close by. It's in session at the moment in the European Parliament. There are 700 MEPs. Some of them are still being told to stay inside the building. It is effectively on lockdown right now while the search goes on for the suspect behind the shootings. The other thing worth mentioning, so the special forces and anti-terrorist units in France, the raid unit, and all the other specialist teams have been deployed to the area, particularly around, we're told, Neudorf, the Etoile Park, Star Park, and the Cathedral are particular areas where the focus is for this suspect. So the authorities around those areas, particularly saying that anybody who lives there, who's in restaurants and bars, absolutely for now stay inside.
Gavin, thank you very much indeed. And let me read you, while we look at these live pictures coming in from Strasbourg, a statement from Jean-Claude Juncker, President of the European Commission. He says, my thoughts are with the victims of the Strasbourg shooting, which I condemn with great firmness. Strasbourg is par excellence a city of the peace and democracy of Europe, values that will always be defended. He says the European Commission stands alongside France. And as Gavin's been talking about, this is a city with a profound connection to the European Union. The European Parliament has 2 bases, one in Brussels, the other in Strasbourg. You've also heard from the French Interior Minister, who says our security and rescue services are being mobilised, as we can see as we watch these pictures come in. He says, do not propagate rumours and follow the advice of the authorities. And it is worth saying that whenever there's an incident like this, these days, a huge amount of misinformation immediately springs up on social media, and we journalists here in the BBC Newsroom in London and in Brussels sifting through all the information that's coming in to make sure what we pass on is information that's reliable. Gavin, let's just talk about what kind of security presence there would have been in Strasbourg on an evening like this anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this is the most famous Christmas market in France since 1570, when it was established as the first Christmas market in France, and so it is the most popular. Between 1 and 4 million people every December descend upon the markets, and what we're hearing tonight is extremely busy, people running in panic for their safety. We've had a police source, according to Reuters, in the past few minutes, are saying that police have confirmed that this suspect was known to police. He was a criminal, somebody who had been in prison in the past, and he was on the radar. That's why they've been able to identify him so quickly. Now, what we know confirmed from the Interior Ministry is this person has been identified, but they're actively searching for them. So that gives us a sense, how quickly they may have been able to identify this suspect. And just going back to that wider point on security, we've heard about people who were going to the Christmas markets, their bags checks. There are, I've seen it from last year, there are cordons all around the market. Given the terrorist attacks that have happened more in France than any other European country in the past 4 years, and given that France is on the 2nd highest level of alert, it was on an emergency alert. Emmanuel Macron brought that down after he came into office. That was in place since the Nice attacks as well, but there's still a lot of security, as I see from the images tonight, with the soldiers actively looking now for the shooter.
A couple of other things to pass on to everyone watching, Gavin. The French counter-terrorism prosecutor, we're told, is monitoring the situation. We would, of course, very much expect that in a situation like this. Also, further details from a European Parliament spokesperson saying the European Parliament building is in lockdown. We've spoken to journalists who are currently inside, and the spokesperson says the European Parliament has been closed and no one can leave until further notice. And actually, Gavin, what's happening at the European Parliament appears to be happening, according to all the sources we're hearing from, across the centre of the city. People are just being told you can't move.
Yeah, in city centre bars, and particularly in the old town where the cathedral is, where the Star Park is, a 12 Park, and also the Newburgh area of Strasbourg. They're the areas we're told that the focus of the police operation, going back to previous shooting and major incidents of terrorism around Europe, it is those first hours after which is the key for the police and security, because they believe that that suspect, the perpetrator, is still in the vicinity. The other thing that we've been doing is a couple of people who live in the vicinity around 8 o'clock, around Clever Square, who have said, and these are verified accounts now, we've spent the last hour trying to work out who these two people are. One is a journalist at TV3, I should say, in Paris, and he said that there was a burst of gunfire, around 12, perhaps up to a dozen shots fired in a 10-minute bracket, around 8 o'clock to 10 past 8. Very quickly after that, within about 5 minutes, the first ambulance and security teams were on the scene, but the perpetrator hasn't been seen since then. We are talking about 2 hours and 10 minutes since the first gunshots were fired.
Those of you just joining us, at the moment, local media in France is saying 2 people have died in this attack. 11 now are reported to be critically wounded or wounded. These figures are changing on a regular basis, so we'll keep you up to date. This, though, is important. That's just come in from Reuters, saying police are saying they've exchanged gunfire with the Strasbourg shooting suspect who's on the run. So for the last hour, we've been told by the French police that someone is at large. They know who it is, but they've not managed to find him or her. The police are saying they had an exchange of gunfire with the suspect. So we're going to keep a close eye on what the police are saying. In the meantime, let's speak to Doris Manu, who's in a restaurant close to where this happened. Doris, thanks for speaking to the BBC. Tell us about what you saw earlier on.
Good evening. Earlier on, I was walking around the Christmas market in central Strasbourg, and I passed a place there where the shooting took place just minutes before it happened. Then I continued walking on a central street in Strasbourg, so I was on Rue du Dôme, when I saw the army with a group of 10 to 12 soldiers walking towards me with their guns pointed to the street, to the people, and around them everyone was running from all directions. So as I was walking past a building, there's a courtyard. I entered the courtyard, and as other people next to me did, we threw ourselves to the ground because we didn't know what is happening. We thought it could be a bomb, it could be a terrorist attack. And then the student, it was actually turned to be courtyard of an IT school, so the students from the school opened the door to us, and we took refuge in the building, and we are still here, waiting for the situation to calm down so that we can go back to our homes, our hotels.
And when all those people were running past you and the armed police were coming in the other direction, were the police or the people who were running speaking to you? Were they telling you anything about what was happening?
Some people around me told me that they received instructions from the military to hide, to run, and others, such as me, know that the soldiers just walked past me because they were very focused on their mission, so they were charging their guns, and running. So I realized at that point that something is happening, and this is when I entered running as well. I entered this courtyard of this building where I still am.
And so at the moment you're in this courtyard and you can't leave?
At the moment I'm in the building, because after we were in the courtyard, the students from the building, which is an IT school, realized that something is happening. They opened the door and they told everyone that we can come in. So we are still in this building, in this school, and we received instructions that it's not safe to go out yet.
Well, Doris, we wish you well. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. And Doris is in a situation which hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people are in central Strasbourg this evening, which is they're being told they cannot leave where they are. And that includes a number of people who are inside the European Parliament, which is on complete lockdown. Now, I've got a statement here from a Sinn Féin member of the European Parliament, Martina Anderson, who says, tonight's shooting at the markets at Place Claver has shocked the city. I was in the centre at the time and heard the gunfire and people, including children, running away in panic. This incident has caused panic in the area with crowds of people who are out enjoying the Christmas markets. And if you are just joining us here on Outside Source, let me bring you right up to date with what's happening in Strasbourg in the east of France. There's been a shooting close to a Christmas market. The latest reports we have are that 2 people have died, more are wounded, perhaps as many as 11 people. We're told the gunman has been identified, and just in the last few minutes we've started to see statements from French police saying gunfire has been exchanged with someone they believe is the suspect, although we have no more information on it than that at the moment. There's Strasbourg on the map of France, but if we go in much more closely, you can see just marked here on the satellite image. It's host to one of the world's biggest and most famous Christmas markets. Thousands and thousands of people like to go there. This view on Google Street View gives you an idea of the size of the square. It's big, but not huge, and it would have been packed with Christmas stalls and people getting into the festivities. Well, this whole area has now been cordoned off. We've been told all of the trams have been stopped from running, and these are some of the most recent news wires to come through, updating us on the story. Reuters telling us the counter-terrorism prosecutor is monitoring the situation. We have this from Reuters as well. The death toll rises to 2 fatalities. That's from the French Interior Minister, so we can treat that as correct. And this from the AFP, arguably the most important update of the last few minutes, telling us that police say they're exchanging gunfire with the suspect. Now let's bring in Gavin Lee, who's working on this from Brussels. And Gavin, from my position here in London, I haven't seen anything more on that exchange of gunfire apart from that one line of copy.
No, we're seeing the same thing here. Now, it is worth saying actually, and perhaps there have been some reports before given a concern by the police and the authorities that there were some fake reports of what was happening. There was, about an hour ago, a journalist at French TV, TV3, who was saying that he saw with his own eyes soldiers shoot a man close to the Christmas markets. This was about an hour ago, and the man fled. Now, this seems to concur with what a police union source are telling our colleagues in Paris, that the gunman was injured by soldiers before fleeing. Now, if they are in the exchange of gunfire now, at least we get a sense now that the attacker, the perpetrator in this, has been injured. The other thing that we're getting that's moving quite quickly is the events and how they develop. So now we know there was a team in operation very close to the Christmas markets that's monitoring and walking on the markets, known to be a Sentinel anti-terrorism outfit. It's made up of soldiers and police. They've been in place since 2015, since the terrorist attacks in Paris, Charlie Hebdo magazine, and the Bataclan attacks. They also say that we were looking at a 2 hours and 15-minute time frame since the first burst of gunfire, and the first around about 12 gunshots heard by eyewitnesses were on Rue de Grande Arcade, which is a street, small street, very close to the Christmas market, maybe 2 or 3 streets away. It caused hundreds, if not thousands, very hard to know, it was busy, of people to run from the markets, and there hasn't been any gunfire since around 8:10. So now we're told there has been a separate exchange in the past 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Stay with us, please. And this is France's Interior Minister posting on Twitter that he's been speaking with the President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, of course, and he says, I'm going immediately to Strasbourg. So the French Interior Minister will be overseeing the official response. I'm also seeing one local shopkeeper told BFM TV, a local TV station, there were gunshots and people running everywhere. It lasted about 10 minutes. Well, a little bit earlier, I spoke to one British member of the European Parliament who was close by when the shooting happened. This is the conversation we had.
Well, I'd just come into the town centre and I noticed there was a lot of commotion. There is the Christmas market on. I wasn't sure what that was about. And I got to the restaurant and it was actually locked. Couldn't get in and I thought this is off. And then somebody inside saw me, recognised me, and they let me in and immediately locked the door. It's just an Italian restaurant. We went to a pizza and so on. Everything around here is currently locked down. People are not being allowed out onto the streets. Well, the streets are empty. People have been asked to vacate the streets, to stay inside. I've heard from reports that nearby department stores, people are locked in. We moved up to the 5th floor for safety. Any hotels, restaurants, all the doors are locked, keeping people inside. And indeed in the European Parliament itself, nobody that's not to leave but to stay in the European Parliament.
So, just to remind you, in Strasbourg, the authorities are saying 2 people have been killed in a gun attack. Between 10 and 11 people have been injured, and there's been an exchange of gunfire with the suspect. We're, of course, keeping a close eye on the situation, and we'll return to it as we go through outside source. But I do want to turn to Brexit and Theresa May's predicament. Remember, it was this evening in London.
Survive if she wins.
Strasbourg, we have a developing
Minority of the Conservative Party being divided, a Parliament being divided over Brexit, which makes you wonder, if she were to lose the vote, Ross, who on earth would want the job?
Rob, thank you very much. We'll talk tomorrow, I'm sure. There's Rob in Westminster. Now, let's go back to Strasbourg. We have a developing story. 2 people have been killed, an unconfirmed number of people injured in a gun attack close to a Christmas market. Maximilian Hoffmann is a journalist with the German broadcaster DW Deutsche Welle. He's in Strasbourg. Maximilian, please tell us what you've seen and heard.
When we heard the first words about this happening, we were sitting in a bar which is close to the cathedral, so in the center of Strasbourg, and once in the center we saw people running into or walking very fast into the restaurant owner on the phone. Nobody can go out anymore. The police just told us it's not possible to go outside anymore. We managed to squeak out to get a pictures trying to stay safe at the same time. And we made it to the Christmas market, which is very close to the scene of the crime. If you recall, we saw a perimeter with military police that would let us go any farther. Massive police presence, security forces streaming into the city, and we then made our way out beyond ascended security perimeter to be able just to work. But of course, the picture you get from Strasbourg right now is a whole lot different from what you usually see. This is the time where many people, millions actually, come to the city because of the Christmas market. And right after this attack happened, it was a very eerie scene with empty streets.
Maximilian, thank you very much. We're up against the end of this half hour of the programme, so we'll leave it there. But thank you for joining us. That's Maximilian Hoffmann, Brussels Bureau Chief for DW Deutsche Welle, German broadcaster. This is still the live feed that we've had coming in for the last couple of hours, showing us this huge security operation going on in Strasbourg. And until very recently, we were being told by the police they'd identified the gunman, but they didn't know where he was. But in the last few minutes, they have said there's been an exchange of gunfire, but we've had no updates further as to what the outcome of that exchange was. We'll, of course, keep you up to date across this story in the next half an hour or two.
Strasbourg. We'll take a look at weather patterns and stories from around the world now. And first of all, we'll start off with snow quite far south. Now, if we take a line of latitude to the south of Spain, across North Africa, and keep spinning the world round, we come to Shanghai. And Shanghai, over the course of the weekend, had a weather front that moved in. It brought outbreaks of rain, which turned to snow as colder air fed in. It's quite unusual to get snow in Shanghai itself. People on social media got very excited by this. And just to the west of Shanghai sits Zhejiang province, which is where this photograph was taken, of the snow settling on vegetation. Meanwhile, at the same sort of time, we had some enormous falls of rain in Vietnam from the northeasterly monsoon that just fed showers into the same area across central areas of Vietnam for days on end. Now, we've had some colossal falls of rain in Da Nang. There have been reports of over 800 millimetres of rain, 843 millimetres of rain. There has been some severe flooding with some 17,000 buildings submerged in the area of central Vietnam, and that beats a previous rainfall record which dates back to 1995. So severe conditions here. We're going to continue to see those northeasterly monsoon showers coming in as well, so we could see further problems. At the same time, some heavy snow works into Hokkaido and the north of Honshu, above 300 metres elevation over the next few days. Now, we've been taking a look at this weather system yesterday, if you joined me then. A lot of cloud in the southern Bay of Bengal, where we've got a developing area of low pressure. This is forecast to deepen and will probably turn into quite a powerful cyclonic storm over the next few days. It then works towards the coastline of India. It might make landfall around Andhra Pradesh. However, it seems reasonably likely that that storm may well lose some of its strength on its final approach, but we'll be keeping a close eye on that nevertheless. Then we've got Owen, which has been pushing its way westwards across Queensland over recent days. It's going to regain strength, so again becoming a cyclone across the Gulf of Carpentaria. And it's going to kind of wobble around here over the next few days, bringing some very wet weather around adjoining areas. We could see some localised flooding across this part of northern Australia over the next few days. I'm going to take you to eastern areas of Europe. Look at all this cloud coming off the Black Sea. We've got an area of low pressure that's strengthening here, and this is going to bring a big winter storm to Ukraine through Wednesday and Thursday. Now, I think we could see around 15 to 30 centimetres of snow falling widely across central Ukraine. That snow will be drifting around in the strong winds as we go through the next couple of days, so I think we're quite likely to see some disruption in this part of eastern Europe. Further west, we've got the colder air filtering in, and it's going to start to feel a bit colder across our shores as well.
Stories set to shape the news agenda. Headlines, freshly written. Original perspectives on the day's unfolding narratives. See the bigger picture as it emerges. The papers, weeknights at 10:40 on the BBC News Channel.
100 years after independence, Poland is grappling with the identity crisis. Amid nationalists, progressives, and the country's newest rivals. Our World, the struggle for Poland's future. Saturday and Sunday, 9:30 p.m. on the BBC News Channel.
When the weather can't decide what to do, you still can. To know what's coming, check the BBC Weather app.
Hello, I'm Zakins. Welcome to Outside Source. This is a live feed coming in from Strasbourg in the east of France. There's been a gun attack. 2 people have died. At least 5 or 6 have been injured, possibly more according to some sources. We'll have all the latest. Prime Minister Theresa May has been in the Netherlands, also in Germany, seeing Angela Merkel, and then in Brussels too. But this was the consistent message she got all day.
Deal we have achieved is the best deal possible. It's the only deal possible.
And the pressure continues to pile up. Tonight there are reports that many senior politicians believe that crucial limit of 48 letters has been reached, which could trigger a vote of confidence within her own Conservative Party. the last couple of hours we've been bringing you details of this shooting close to a Christmas market in Strasbourg in the east of France. Early reports say 2 people have died. A number of different sources have different numbers for how many people have been wounded, but a number are saying at least 6 or 7, and the Interior Ministry is also confirming those 2 fatalities. We also know a gunman is on the run. Those are the basics of the story, but let's bring in the BBC's Gavin Lee, who's been helping me across the last hour or two. So Gavin, first of all, what do we think the current situation is?
The current situation from police in the last 10 minutes, the last update that we had, is that this is still a ongoing operation trying to find the gunman. There have been reports from police sources that they have exchanged gunfire. That's coming from Reuters. We haven't had confirmation separately from the police on that. This is a search that's been going on for 2 hours, 2 hours 32 minutes now. The first gunfire that was reported was 8 o'clock local time, close to the Christmas markets, the biggest Christmas markets and the most famous Christmas markets in France, and the oldest too, in Strasbourg, in the east of France. And there were at least 12 shots heard by witnesses in the area. It was Rue de Grande Arcade, a street very close to the Christmas markets. And in that time, we're told from police officials now, the official figure is that 1 person has died and at least 10 people injured, although as you've reported in local TV and now reporting in most of the agencies, the Reuters and so forth, reporting 2 dead and 11 people injured. And to bring you up to date with the latest we know the RAID, the anti-terrorist unit, the French terror unit, and the Sentinel teams. These are basically the military, about 10,000 troops, and the police, 5,000 troops, that were formed as a combined unit after the 2015 Paris attacks in November. There were some of the units who were monitoring the Christmas markets at 8 o'clock, and there were reports that they managed to shoot the gunman before he disappeared, so he's said to be injured.
Gavin, please stay with us. We've just managed to get through on the phone to a man called Peter Fritz, who was an eyewitness to all of this. Peter, thank you for joining us. I understand you were able to help, or try to help, a tourist who got caught up in this. Please tell us what happened.
Well, it seems I was witness to apparently the first incident that happened, and what happened was I heard 2 distinct noises, but I took them to be firecrackers. But when I turned around the corner, I did see 1 person on the ground with an apparent headshot wound, at least 1, and his wife standing close by. He's a tourist from Thailand, about in his 30s, and we tried our best to resuscitate him. We applied CPR. We dragged him into a restaurant close by. I had help with some medical people from Germany, but it took more than 45 minutes for an ambulance to appear. Maybe the ambulance's way was blocked as well because of security precautions.
And how is the man? Were you able to resuscitate him?
After 45 minutes, we were told over the phone by an emergency doctor that any further efforts would be futile. He's still here in the restaurant, but we have abandoned all hope for him. And right now the authorities are carrying on the investigation.
So just to be clear, you have the body of someone who's been killed this evening in a restaurant, and the authorities are not coming to collect that body or to treat it?
Well, yes, no, right now they're present and they're doing everything they have to do. But of course, this is being treated, I guess, as a crime site, and therefore they won't go ahead and move him until they have an exact picture of the situation.
Well, this is an absolutely terrible development, both for the man who's lost his life and for those of you who've been caught up in this.
It was also still here, and a bit of shock, but well unhurt.
I'm sure it's unimaginable for her this evening. Was this man the only person who was injured close to you, or were there other people who were struck by bullets?
Close to me, that was the only incident I witnessed, but I figure that there has been some further incidents because I was on the edge of the Christmas market on the outer perimeter, and apparently something bad has happened inside the Christmas market as well.
Peter, are you able to describe to me what's happening in the building where you are at the moment? How many people are there? What's the
it's
situation?
a restaurant. It's a typical Strasbourg restaurant, a wine tasting place, and people are just sitting there and being interrogated by the police and asked for whatever they can have witnessed.
And what have the said to you?
Well, right now I was so busy talking to my station and to the BBC, so they hadn't even approached me yet.
And in terms of when they might let you leave, are they giving any indication when people will be able to go outside again?
Not yet, no. I mean, I might even be able to go outside, but I wouldn't think it to be a totally wise move. And with this apparently dead person lying in the middle of the entrance hallway, I would more or less have to step over him. So I'd rather not.
There'll be a lot of people who are listening who are shocked at the situation that you're in and are concerned for the wife of the man who's died. Is she receiving the kind of support she very much needs at the moment?
Yes, definitely. She's being treated, she's being taken care of. And I heard talk of maybe bringing her to a psychiatric emergency ward for the night.
And when this happened earlier, how quickly did the attack begin and finish?
It was a matter of seconds. It was 2 shots being fired, and that took more or less 1 or 2 seconds.
And when it was happening, did you have any idea where those shots were coming from?
No. I was around the corner. I didn't even take it so seriously. It sounded like some petards to me, like some firecrackers.
And as we're talking, we're seeing lots of police on the streets now, but at the time, was there a big police presence in that part of Strasbourg?
Well, there's the usual presence. The Christmas market in Strasbourg is obviously, and has been for a long while, a matter of interest, a matter of focus. When it comes to police work, it's the biggest such market in France, and of course, there was always talk of it maybe one day being a target.
Well, Peter, we appreciate you speaking to us. I'm imagining the atmosphere in this restaurant at the moment is one of profound shock.
Yeah, that's true, but also some kind of agitation. I mean, the people are, trying to help the police, trying to help the wife of the victim. So, yeah, everybody's just trying to do the best.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for speaking to us. Peter Fritz is on the phone from a restaurant in the centre of Strasbourg, and he has tried to help someone who was shot in this attack, but unfortunately whose life couldn't be saved, and the wife of the tourist who lost his life is still within that restaurant being comforted by the people who had been dining in there. Let's bring Gavin Lee back in from Brussels. Gavin, there'll be people who are shocked that Peter Fritz there says it was 45 minutes between when you started to try and help this man and when someone arrived.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just shocking listening to that account, wasn't it? It may perhaps explain why across French media, television, radio, across all the wires, the news agencies right now are reporting 2 people killed, 11 people injured. The police official death toll at the moment is 1 person has been killed in the shooting incident tonight in Strasbourg. 10 people have been injured because the body of that person who's been killed is still within that restaurant. I mean, we're getting other news in the past few minutes as well from Christopher Castanet, who's the French Interior Minister, to say that the gunman was known, and this is somebody who's reported to be 29 years old, that he was born in Strasbourg, and no clarity yet on these reports in France that exchanges the gun have been exchanged in the past half an hour or so, that they believe that they've located the man. All we're being told is that they are still actively searching for the gunman, and it's understood that he has been injured. Now, this is an event that's been ongoing now for 2 hours and 40 minutes since those first gunshots were heard on Rue de Grande Arcade, which is a small street close to the Christmas markets, the biggest, as we said, in the whole of France. There are 3 different locations at least where the gunfire was heard, and we just heard from that man within the restaurant who said it was seconds that he heard this blast of gunfire, but we're told it was about a 10-minute window of the gunfire on these 3 different locations close to the Christmas markets, and right now we believe where Strasbourg Cathedral is, within the centre of the town, that's where the police are now focusing their search for this man, possibly exchanges of gunfire. And to step back briefly, Ross, for those who haven't been to Strasbourg, it's somewhere I'm very familiar with because of European Parliament in particular, which is ongoing and under lockdown tonight. Some of those 750 MEPs told to stay indoors for the moment. They call the Christmas market in the old town area the Grand Ile, the island, because the only way to access the markets is by the bridges across the water. So it gives you a sense of perhaps the difficulty of the terrain there, of getting there and actually focusing this police operation now to find this gunman.
I'm seeing as well that the French Interior Ministry has set up, let's just bring you a couple more updates here and I'll come back to Gavin. The French Interior Ministry has set up a phone number for people caught up in the current situation. I won't give you the phone number now, but if you look up the Interior Ministry Twitter feed, if you need to use that number, it's very easy to find. We're also told by the French Interior Ministry, and they've repeated this message, do not broadcast false information. They're clearly very concerned about false information being shared by people online. And Jean-Claude Juncker, President of the European Commission, has said, my thoughts are with the victims of the Strasbourg shooting, and he says, I condemn with great firmness what's happened. Let me just have a look at what newswires have come in here. We've got a few different updates. This from Reuters, at least 2 people injured, 11 injured, 2 people have died, and this is coming from local police. These figures are changing a lot, particularly the number of people injured. AFP telling us about the exchange of gunfire. Well, we've known that for a little while, and this also, that the French prosecutors say a terror investigation has been opened up as part of their response to this. Gavin, you were talking about the fact the European Parliament's on lockdown. By the sounds of it, there are still thousands of people in lots of different locations in Strasbourg who are being told you still can't go anywhere.
Right across the city centre, and bear in mind, as we've talked about a little earlier, this is the busiest market across France. Between 1 and 4 million people in December visit these markets, and we heard from the incredible phone call that you just had with that man in the restaurant, where there's somebody who's been, he reports, killed, and their body is still within the restaurant, and they're told not to move. Well, there are hundreds of restaurants. I've spoken to a few people tonight, including other journalists who were covering events at the European Parliament that moved to dinner this evening in the old part of Strasbourg, and they're still within the restaurants. They're told that there are police outside. All they can hear are the sirens right now, and this has been going on for 2 hours and 50 minutes now. So the city, pretty much the old part of the city, about 2 square kilometres under lockdown. No sense or not in terms of whether they have found the suspect. He's believed to be injured, shot by soldiers who first approached him. No sense there as to where he is. They've focused on 3 places: at Star Park, Etoile Park, the quarter called Neudorf, which is very close to the Christmas markets. They basically a block of about 12 streets, and also Strasbourg Cathedral. Those are the 3 areas that seem to be central of the focus for the police. They call it the Sentinel operation, which is the anti-terrorism operation combined with soldiers, the police, and the anti-terrorist so-called raid unit in France as well.
Gavin, many thanks for your help. So just to reiterate what we've been talking about for the last couple of hours, French police are saying 2 people have died in a gun attack in the centre of Strasbourg. There is not a confirmed number for the number of people wounded, but the highest reports are 10 and 11, although that figure has been fluctuating in the last few minutes. We'll of course keep you up to date. Let's turn away from Strasbourg though to talk about British politics and Brexit, because while the Prime Minister has been on the
So for that reason alone, she may live to see another day.
Okay, Naomi, thank you very much indeed. It's probably worth reiterating. It's only Tuesday. It feels like we've had about a month's worth of politics here in the UK this week. But it is only Tuesday. We'll see what Wednesday brings. Now, we must turn back to what's been a developing story throughout this edition of Outside Source. The situation in the centre of Strasbourg, where there's been a fatal shooting. Local police are saying 2 people have died. More people have wounded. We understand the gunman's been identified. There's been an exchange of fire with him, although we don't know the outcome of that exchange. This has also happened very close to Strasbourg, France, but this happened near to a place called Place, where you would find one of Strasbourg's famous,
keep
world famous
commenting.
Christmas markets, which is hugely
Yes.
popular with locals and tourists alike, and very close to the European Parliament as well. Let's bring in Gavin Lee one last time.
I'm not panicking.
Gavin, for people
I'm not
just
panicking.
joining us, what do
Ban.
we understand about the chronology
I'm
of
feeling
what happened
instant,
a
you know.
couple of hours ago
No.
or so?
You know
I
me,
think
I'm
we have a
feeling
clearer picture now that
right.
this appears to be a terrorist attack in Strasbourg that started around 8 o'clock local
You've
time,
got
just
to
over
know.
2 hours, 3 minutes ago. There was a burst of gunfire
doing
close
major
to the
live.
Christmas markets in Strasbourg. They call it the Grand Ile. It's an area surrounded by rivers and bridges.
I have all
It's
these
the
another
most
like
popular
this
Christmas
on
markets in
Sunday.
France. This was basically 3 streets around the markets where eyewitnesses reported hearing around 12 gunshots
if it's
fired. And the
like this.
perpetrator, according to police union sources, was shot by soldiers shortly after that. The Sentinel team, these were set up, soldiers to patrol some of the cities and the towns in the aftermath of the 2015 attack. We are being told now that the search for the suspect is still ongoing, but there's a particular area called the Neudorf district. It's very close to the European Parliament, actually. It's almost 2 villages just outside of the Christmas market area in Strasbourg, the east of France. That's where the suspect is believed to be. We've had an update from the local prefecture, the local authority in Strasbourg. They say there have been 13 victims. 2 people have died. 7 people are seriously injured. There are 4 with minor injuries. You mentioned Place Kleber. This is a place, it's Kleber Square, where it's now been cordoned off. It's being used as a triage centre for the ambulance services to help some of those victims up to point for urgent medication. We've heard as well this evening from somebody within a restaurant speaking to you to say that they identified somebody who tried to help somebody who'd been shot and that he died in front of them. So that person clearly needs support as well. There's been an urgent medical psychological centre opened up in the centre as well. It's still cordoned off. People are still being told around the Christmas markets, around the old part of Strasbourg, to stay indoors tonight. Restaurants, including the European Parliament, not to leave while there is an ongoing operation. And a little more too, Ross, on the attacker, the suspect here, who French authorities say he was on a terrorist S list, what's called the Fichier list in France, that he is believed to be a threat to national security, somebody who's classified as a radicalised individual, 29 years old, reported across French local media, born in Strasbourg. So as I say, that operation still ongoing.
Gavin, thank you very much. We'll come back to you in a moment. This has just come in from the President of the European Parliament, Antonio Tajani, saying, I express all my sorrow to victims of the Strasbourg attacks. This Parliament will not be intimidated by terrorist or criminal attacks. Let us move on. We will continue to work and react, strengthen freedom and democracy against terrorist violence. So this is the President of the European Parliament. As Gavin's been telling us, the European Parliament has 2 bases, one in Brussels and one in Strasbourg, very close to where this attack took place. The next thing I want to play you is an eyewitness account from a man called Peter Fritz, who tried to help one of the victims.
Hold on, guys. Freaking finish playing out.
Well, what I heard shortly after 8 p.m., I should say, were 2...
Antonio Tajani saying, I express all my sorrow for the victims of the Strasbourg attacks. This Parliament will not be intimidated by terrorist or criminal attacks. Let us move on. We will continue to work and react, strengthened by freedom and democracy against terrorist violence. So this is the President of the European Parliament. As Gavin's been telling us, the European Parliament has 2 bases, one in Brussels and one in Strasbourg, very close to where this attack took place. The next thing I want to play you is an eyewitness account from a man called Peter Fritz, who tried to help one of the victims.
Well, what I heard shortly after 8 p.m., I should say, were 2 distinct gunshots and people fleeing the place. Now, I wasn't sure these were actually gunshots when I went around the corner. I saw a person with apparently 2 shots into the head lying on the bridge here. We tried to engage in resuscitation activities. We took him to a restaurant, which I'm in right now, and we tried for 45 minutes to resuscitate him. There are no ambulance services apparently able to enter the area. Everybody told us that the ambulance has been called. So far, no signs of police people cordoning off the area. And after 40 minutes, we started
Let's see.
So local
Yep.
police are now telling Reuters and other media that 2 people have
Yeah,
died,
it is.
11 people have been injured. This is also worth mentioning that Gavin was saying this, that Strasbourg gunman has been identified by police as an S-file security risk. And Gavin, just to explain, there are, would I be right in saying, thousands of people who are considered worthy of being an S-file security risk?
Yeah, huge, tens of thousands of individuals. I think back in 2015, when they were compiling just the sheer numbers, there was an issue of realistically how many you can really get to and monitor. The same in many European countries, including in the UK, those who are on a suspect list or a suspicion list of those radicalised individuals. The other thing we're just hearing now coming in from European Parliament is that the Parliament will be closed at least for the next hour or so. They, according to the staff inside the Parliament, they've been informed by the police that the incident has stabilised. We're not sure what that means, but they've been told that the shooter, quote, hasn't been arrested. They advise everybody within the European Parliament to stay confined inside and away from windows. We have also a message, we also reports coming in from French TV, BFM TV, that 4 people have been killed. The confirmation that we've got so far from the French Interior Minister is 2 people have died. And also possibly key information here, a number of newswires reporting that the presumed attacker's home was raided this morning and that he escaped arrest during the raid. So we're getting to start to get a clearer picture of what potentially happened in the events following up to the shooting tonight.
Gavin, thank you very much for your help, and of course there are updates on this story on the BBC News website as we go.
There's going to be more corruption.
Hello, we are closer to knowing what sort of UK.
Today's weather.
It's getting colder.
I keep mentioning this.
Tonight at 10, as the Prime Minister tries to rescue her Brexit deal, she faces the growing likelihood of a confidence vote among Conservative MPs. This is based every day in EU capitals, trying to get more assurances on her Brexit plan, insisting it was all to blame.
What has been shown to me from those meetings is that there is a shared determination to deal with this issue, this problem.
But this Westminster on the Prime Minister's position. Another major story tonight. A big security operation in the French city of Strasbourg. At least 2 people are dead, several injured after a shooting incident near a Christmas market. And this is the scene there live. The gunman is said to be still at large. Much of the city is reported to be in lockdown. More migrants claiming to be from Iran have been rescued from a small boat in the English Channel in the early hours of this morning. Wages have risen at their fastest rate in a decade. Good evening. The Prime Minister spent the day on a rapid tour of...
The Prime Minister actually stuck in a...
There's no...
Okay. I think time. Cut out the small screen. Alright. I think about it on tomorrow's paper. So it's not.
The threshold of 48 letters required to trigger a contest that could oust her has been reached. The mood has darkened, but there's no official confirmation. Tonight, we just can't be sure.
Theresa May.
But remember, we've been here before, not even a month ago. A group of Brexiteers brandishing their letters of no confidence publicly, calling for a contest to replace Theresa May. Their effort then ended in embarrassment. They simply did not have the numbers to trigger a vote. Has anything changed?
Figuring out leadership.
Oh, small. Okay. That's time. Oh, four being killed, It's wrong.
We're at Westminster in just a moment. Let's go to Brussels first of all and talk to our Europe editor, Katja Adler. This round of visits and talks today by the Prime Minister, Katja, has it led to anything?
Well, it basically...
I'm waiting for that thing. Is that fantastic? Now. Oh, stronger. Okay. Sweet. Maybe not writing anything. Yeah, I have been. I'm not playing these. Maybe. I'm not punching bad. You know I'm doing this as long history, you know. I don't should be. I'm filming. No. Oh, as I get more and more updates on that shooting.
A major story for us tonight, which is that 2 people have died, at least 2 people, and several people have been injured in a shooting incident near the Christmas market in the French city of Strasbourg. French Interior Ministry confirmed a serious public security incident there and urged residents to stay indoors. Shooting is said to have happened close to a Christmas market in one of the central squares in Strasbourg. Our correspondent Lucy Williamson has the latest.
France tonight relived the terror of another attack. In the narrow streets of Strasbourg's Christmas market, riot police and the gunmen who opened fire on the crowds here. His gunshots initially mistaken by one witness for fireworks. This footage shows the moment one of the victims was shot amid the chaos and panic of Christmas revelers. At least 2 people have reportedly been killed, many more injured. Peter Fritz witnessed one of the attacks.
Well, what I heard shortly after 8 p.m., I should say, were 2 distinct gunshots and people fleeing the place. Now, I wasn't sure these were actually gunshots, and I went around the corner and I saw a person with apparently 2 shots into the head lying on the bridge here. We tried to engage in resuscitation activities. We took him to a restaurant, which I'm in right now, and we tried for 45 minutes to resuscitate him.
The gunman is reportedly known to security services and is now on the run. Police say he's been injured after an exchange of fire. The French government has told people to stay where they are. Lawmakers and staff have been locked into the European Parliament just 15 minutes away from the scene.
Our situation is extreme. You cannot leave a building here.
Well, the streets are empty. People have had to vacate the streets to stay inside. Any hotels, restaurants, all the doors are locked, keeping people inside. And indeed in the European Parliament itself.
The President of the European Commission said tonight that Strasbourg was a symbolic city of peace and democracy. Values, he said, that we will always defend.
It's the live Paris, and Lucy's there for us. We've been monitoring the latest reports there, Lucy. What's going on?
Well, this is an ongoing operation as we speak. The area around the shootings is still in lockdown. People are still being kept inside, locked inside restaurants, locked inside hotels. The latest we have is that the gunman is still on the run, but there is one unconfirmed report from an agency here that he's been cornered by police and a shootout is underway. That's an unconfirmed report, but obviously details are very sketchy. This is a moving situation and one which opens up very deep wounds here in France.
Lucy, many thanks again for the update. Lucy Williamson. Now, 6 people claiming to be migrants from Iran were rescued from a small boat in the English Channel near the Kent coast in the early hours of this morning. More than 100 migrants, most of them thought to be
I think maybe on the newspaper
the Dover route is the world's busiest shipping lane, and the British authorities are warning of the dangers of trying to cross, especially in a small vessel.
Keep pulling light.
Colin Campbell is this exclusive report.
Finish it.
Emerging from the darkness, an inflatable dinghy. It's 2 a.m. We're in the middle of the English Channel. The dinghy is motoring at full speed from France towards the Kent coast. We get a thumbs up. However, the boat is dangerously overcrowded, taking on water. The 6 migrants, cold, scared, desperate, but determined to get to the UK.
This dinghy is in a precarious position. It's vulnerable because it's now entering a shipping lane and there are a number of ships towards it. So we're shepherding it almost, I think, at the moment. so it remains in a safe position.
We're on board a Dover fishing boat. This is the third migrant rescue for skipper Matthew Coker in 3 months.
There was 5 ships coming down in one night, and he cut across in front of it. And I don't know if we hadn't been with him, those ships wouldn't have got round it. Because I'm only just walking up. So I don't think there's no lights on the boat at all.
The migrants who are wrapped in blankets and scarves speak little English.
Where are you from? You're Iranian. The water at the moment appears to be going into the back of the dinghy, but they're continuing, they're not stopping, they don't want our help. It's a desperate race to try to get to the UK for these people.
Although they decline our offers of help, they do stop to ask for water, which I lower down to them in a net.
Okay.
In the last 3 months, more than 100 migrants have made this treacherous crossing. A fortnight ago, we exposed how some of the smuggling operations are being planned from a makeshift migrant camp in Dunkirk, we secretly filmed using an undercover researcher.
Suppose it will cost you £3,000 to £4,000. But then I'm taking 3 people with me. They pay me. We get a boat, and off we go.
Last night, the weather and sea conditions in the channel were good, but in a small boat, in the dark, it's still incredibly dangerous.
The message is going back to the camps or to the people on the other side, to the gangs, that it's working. So more are going to come, and I'm certain they will keep coming until there's an absolute tragedy.
These migrants were safely rescued by the RNLI and the Border Force, but it is a potentially deadly route that more and more are trying. Despite winter, despite the risks, the migrants keep coming. Colin Campbell, BBC News, Dover.
With me is our Home Minister Mark Easton, and just to pick up on the point that Colin was thinking about the other piece, the astonishing level of risk that these people take. It is quite remarkable. The stories of these desperate people, but as you saw from deep mostly begin actually in Iran. Many of them are Kurdish, middle-class people, quite well-educated, speaking English. They have seen them travel first actually to Serbia. From then they go across
Finish this live stream.
French or Belgian coast and dreaming of joining the settled Kurdish communities here in the UK. And that's of course where the organised crime groups move in, that final leg of the journey, a birth on a precarious and social across the middle of winter. Would pay thousands of euros. Why do they risk it? Well, I think part of the story is a success actually. It's the recent coordinated response of security forces in France and the closure of the camps in Dunkirk and Calais, the opportunity just to jump on the back of a lorry, that kind of thing has diminished. But smuggling migrants through the ports is still a far more important route numerically than dinghies across the beach. The latest figures show there were 882 clandestine detections, migrants found hiding in the most recent figures in a year. And those, of course, are the ones.
Over. Fishing.
There, you basically pay the upper level market rate, the market rate. For the ones less skilled, you basically wages have
Now,
been
we're
increasing
gonna
over the last couple of
leave.
years ahead of inflation. With record numbers of people in work, the shortage of skilled and
Put
unskilled
like,
labour is one reason
comment,
pay is now rising
share,
1% faster
and
than prices.
put
Now, if your glass is half
forward
full
slash
after Christmas, that's great news. The average
percent.
wage is now here.
Okay.
We can afford to buy more than we've been able to since 2011. With the glass is half empty, though, the average wage for more than it does now before 2011.
We're told that it will take till 2024 for wages to get back to where they were before the financial crash. Ordinary families in Britain
Put
can't afford
like,
to wait. We need
comment,
action from the government
and
now
share.
to raise wages and deliver decent jobs.
From the latest figures, there were
Share.
132,000
And
fewer
put
EU workers in the UK than there were a year ago, whereas the number of UK nationals in the workforce grew
Tag on your profile
448,000.
with
Now,
Facebook
some that's
and
pensioners
YouTube.
working into retirement, but there's also
Remember,
been a big drop in the number of people who are economically inactive. In other words, people of working age, such as stay-at-home mums and dads and students, who aren't looking for work. As a proportion of the population, that group is now smaller than it's been since records began, and the unemployment rate is just 4.1%. With the prospect of a no-deal Brexit, it's going to hit jobs. It hasn't yet shown up in the figures. Andy Geraghty, BBC News.
Scientists are warning that newly discovered melting in the glaciers in East Antarctica could cause significant rises in sea levels right around the globe. The region around Vincent Bay has long been considered stable and unaffected by some of the more dramatic changes occurring elsewhere on the continent. Our science editor David Shukman has sent this report from the UN Climate Change Conference taking place in Poland.
A great chunk of ice breaks into the ocean. Antarctica holds so much frozen water that if all of it melted, the level of the sea would rise by as much as 70 metres. That's why NASA and other teams are keeping a very close watch. Back in 2004, I joined a research lab over West Antarctica, where the glaciers, the great streams of ice, have for years been a big concern. But now NASA has studied satellite data and discovered that there's also melting in East Antarctica. This is a much larger mass of ice. The red areas show where the ice is shrinking, blue where it's growing. The glaciers here are showing signs of stirring.
We've known for some time that parts of Antarctica are losing ice into the ocean, causing sea level rise. NASA has now reported that another 8 glaciers in a different part of Antarctica are also losing ice. This is an effect of the oceans changing the temperature and taking warm water to the Antarctic Ocean and causing it to melt.
This matters for cities around the world. Every extra bit of melting threatens the millions of people who live on coastlines. And that threat is now getting global attention. The future of the polar ice is being discussed here at the United Nations Climate Conference in Poland. The point of these talks is to try to prevent the increase in temperatures, to head off the rise of the oceans. And this new research shows why that matters.
I think that it goes with the trends that climate change is becoming a more material issue that we have to respond to. We're not just looking at science into the future, we're thinking about issues that are affecting us now, and we have to be much more live and contemporary and push harder with our decision making.
The ice in Antarctica and the Arctic might seem very remote, but it has the potential to cause serious damage as the world gets warmer. Now, most countries here will point to this latest research as yet more evidence that climate change is incredibly serious. But a few, notably the United States and Saudi Arabia, have been using this conference to play down the state of climate science. And this is bound to be a source of growing tension over the next couple of days. Hugh.
David, many thanks again. David Shukman there for us in Katowice. And if you'd like to ask David anything about his report tonight, or more broadly about global warming, he'll be answering your questions on Twitter for the next 30 minutes or so from the UN's Climate Change Conference. You can tweet him at David Shukman BBC, it's there on the screen for you, or the hashtag is BBC News 10, and then you can get your points and questions to him for the next half hour or so. Now, Manchester City's manager says he believes racism is still a deep-rooted problem in society. He was reacting to the allegations of racial abuse suffered by the City and England player Raheem Sterling. 4 Chelsea fans have been suspended from attending matches after an incident involving Sterling. He was Sports editor Dan Rowan has more details.
He'd been a victim of alleged racism at the weekend, but Raheem Sterling appeared relaxed as he arrived for training this afternoon. The Manchester City star has linked negative
That's
media
starting
coverage of
Thursday.
players with abuse at matches, and today the club's manager told me he backed his player.
Are you proud of him for having the coach
That
speak?
was Dr. Thursday. And what's happening now out there? Just put in.
A 60-year-old man from Beckenham, Colin Wynn, has said he's one of the fans suspended by Chelsea after the incident at Stamford Bridge, but he told a national newspaper that while he apologised for swearing at Sterling, he denied racist language and used the word man, not black. Raheem Sterling and the rest of the Manchester City squad are now having to focus on preparing for their final Champions League group game against Hoffenheim tomorrow evening. But by confronting the causes of racism in football in a way that very few Premier League players have done, Sterling has sparked a major debate across the game and beyond.
Racism is everywhere. People who focus in football. It's not just in football, unfortunately. Because just in football will be safe, but the racism is everywhere. I appreciate what Chelsea do. It happened in my club. We should do the same. So we have to fight strictly for the human rights, for everything to make a better society for the future. Today we are vendors.
It's been an uncomfortable few days for football, but with two of the game's biggest names now speaking out, the fight against racism in the sport may have received a timely boost. Dan Rowan, BBC News.
Now, Google's worldwide boss, its chief executive, Sundar Pichai, has told a US congressional committee that his organisation steers clear of political bias and insisted that that was a core principle of the business. But Pichai strongly denied claims by President Trump supporters that Google operates an overtly political agenda which suppresses conservative views and promotes a more liberal agenda. Our media editor, Amol Rajan, has the story.
A soft-spoken Tamil engineer who embodies the ambition of India's diaspora, Pichai Sundararajan, better known as Sundar, is shy by nature.
Right, and you swear that
Just like Mark Zuckerberg did. But whereas Facebook's founder, CEO, chairman and majority shareholder has taken a very public beating this year, Google's boss has resisted interrogation in Washington. The 46-year-old has been in charge of Google for 3 years and took home around $200 million in 2016.
If you Google the word idiot under images, a picture of Donald Trump comes up. I just did that.
He faced a barrage of questions about alleged anti-conservative bias.
Google could well elect the next president with dire implications for our democracy.
How do you explain this apparent bias on Google's part against conservative points of view?
I can assure you, we do it without regards to political ideology. Our algorithms have no notion of political sentiment.
Of the English.
I am concerned that you are now going back into China.
Congressman has outset, right now we have no plans to launch in China.
You guys can leave
Search product there. And if
now. I'm gonna turn it off. Local one and
this phone know that I have moved here and moved over to the left. It's either yes or no.
Not by default. There may be a Google service which you confidently use.
Google's boss was also relatively unscathed on questions of tax and gender equality among staff. Unlike Facebook, Google have been canny about structuring their company in a way that dissipates power, responsibility, and blame. Yet Sundar Pichai is fast becoming the face of a company that might, just might, repeat. Internal tensions, macroeconomic instability, and above all, the fierce gaze of lawmakers across the globe all point to a tougher future. With just 5 years for each questioner, limits their ability to land their blows. Google will while their enemies will rue a missed opportunity. Amol Rajan,
for respect.
A man has been arrested by armed police officers in Westminster
I give it one more about this.
Tasered after jumping over railings and running towards officers. He's been arrested on trespassing at a protected site. Police say the incident is not thought to be terror-related and no weapon was recovered. The former England footballer Paul Gascoigne appears to be
This is it.
reported as drunk and pleaded not guilty
Hi
to
guys,
charge of
I am not going to turn off this. That's true.
and is due to appear in court again next month. So let's have some football news now then. Both Liverpool and Tottenham are through to the knockout stage.
And I'm going to turn this off straight and turn this.
But first, Andy Swiss reports from Anfield.
Yes. Hey, so see. There's going to be nothing. Let's see if there's no more. Good night, everyone. Remember, put like, comment, share, and support the victims.
They knew a Napoli goal, though, would change everything. Not that one
Remember,
likely, as Liverpool dominated the second
Paul,
half. But they couldn't take their chances. And in injury time, what
fans,
drama.
respect
Napoli with a chance to
the
put
victims.
Liverpool out, but their keeper
So,
Alisson saved them.
come on.
And their